Okay, so I'm going to officially get started by just welcoming all of you guys. Welcome to Wat Tung, Sawadee Krap, Sawadee Krap. Welcome to everyone who's joining online as well. This is just a short little course called the Introduction to the Teachings of the Buddha. It's 3 hours of us to spend some time together, just getting you guys acquainted with the teachings of the Buddha. We're going to be starting out with some meditation to help you guys practice a little bit of his teachings and learn about meditation. Then I'm going to spend some time talking about what the teachings of the Buddha are and what the teachings of the Buddha are not. And then we're going to probably take a break right there, give you guys a chance to kind of spend some time with each other, stretch your legs, use the restroom, all those kinds of things. And then I'm going to share with you the very first teaching of the Buddha. The very first teaching of the Buddha is called the Four Noble Truths. In 4 simple statements, he explains what is the problem in the mind that he discovered in the unenlightened mind, what is the cause of that, the elimination of it, and the path forward. Because what he did is he figured out how to get to this enlightened mental state where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you will no longer experience any discontent feelings. You will have eliminated all your anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. Oftentimes people think it's the outside world that's causing these feelings for you, but what you're going to be able to see in the Four Noble Truths in a way that you can independently verify that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. This is why you can actually eliminate it. Oftentimes, as I mentioned, people oftentimes think it's other people. Maybe it's your mom or dad or your brothers and sisters that are frustrating you or annoying you. But if that was the case, nobody could ever get to the point where they eliminate their anger, sadness, frustration, and other feelings. So the Buddha figured out how to do this, and his teachings are independently verifiable, which I'm going to help you guys to understand what that means and how to actually do that. So the Four Noble Truths is going to be an opportunity for you to have a breakthrough, for you to once and for all understand why you experience these discontent feelings and how to eliminate them. So welcome to all of you guys here. Welcome to everyone joining online as well. If you'd like to join for meditation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with some chanting to ease us into the meditation. And if you guys would like to chant along, you're more than welcome to. There's chanting sheets over there on the cabinet. You're welcome to help yourself to get one. During the lifetime of the Buddha, they used chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory. Every 2 weeks, his students would come together and they would recite his teachings orally. So he used chanting as a learning tool or as a learning device. So you can understand from the origins of chanting that this isn't a rite, ritual, ceremony, worship, or prayer, or anything like that. There's none of those kinds of things in the teachings of the Buddha. If you see rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, or prayer being associated with the teachings of the Buddha, those individuals have misunderstood the teachings of the Buddha. So I use these chants as a way to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. So if you like to chant along, you're more than welcome to. If you read the English translations, you're going to see a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for the Buddha. And because of this, I don't think the Buddha even created these chants. They were probably created by his students, either during his life or after his death. Because the Buddha wouldn't walk around and say, here, chant these chants to me out of respect for me, right? This would be like the ego and arrogance. And by the time someone's gotten to enlightenment, they don't see themselves as being above other people, and they don't look down on other people. So the Buddha wouldn't have gone around and taught people to chant these things to him. But if you learn from a teacher how to move from anger, sadness, frustration, and all these other discontent feelings to the peace and joy, which is a permanent mental state, and this teacher didn't want anything or expect anything from you, they were just helping you out of the kindness of their heart, you'd probably have a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for that person too. So that's why I think that these chants actually came from his students, either during his life or after his death. So you guys are welcome to chant along, and you'll see that you'll get more benefit out of the meditation itself. And for those of you guys online, you can get this chanting sheet from our website, buddhadailywisdom.com. Click on free books, and then you can scroll down towards the bottom and you'll see these chanting sheets. In terms of your body position for meditation, the Buddha taught 4 positions to meditate in: seated, lying, standing, and walking. And you would learn these different positions as part of your journey to enlightenment. It's kind of like a tool belt, and you use the different tools that you need at different times. So I teach those at the various programs that I share, but typically when people are just getting introduced to the teachings, I just help you to understand a little bit about the seated position to be able to help you find something that's comfortable. Because there isn't just one way way to actually meditate. There's multiple ways. All of our bodies are different, and we'll each find something comfortable that's different. So you can really sit however you like. But what I'm going to share with you are just some suggestions or recommendations that you might consider in order to find something that's comfortable for you. So you could sit on the floor or in a chair. Maybe if you're at home, you're on a bench or a sofa or a wheelchair. You can really sit however you like. If you're on the floor, you might sit with some cushions under your rear. This will help make your seat a bit softer. If you're going to bring your legs together in the cross-leg position, you like to do that just lightly. Whereas if they're real tight, it can impede the circulation in the lower body. Some people like to put their legs off the mat. This gets their hips up in the air, and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles, again, allowing the circulation to flow. The Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. But remember, it's not about everyone doing it exactly the same way. There's other options here as well. So you find whatever's comfortable for you. Some people like to put their palms on their thighs or their knees. Some people put their palms up. Some people rest their hands comfortably in their lap. So you can just put your hands and arms wherever you like. And it's the same thing for anyone who's in a chair, or on a bench, or a sofa, or a wheelchair. You can also sit however you like. Some people like to put their feet flat on the floor or lightly cross at the ankles, but you can see me sitting here in a chair with my legs crossed, so this is an option for you as well. And then you can put your hands and arms wherever you like. In terms of your upper body, you would like this to be erect, with the sternum up and the shoulders back. It'll help keep the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. Whereas if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be dull or lethargic. But if you were real rigid, the mind could be overactive or uptight. Meditation is a dedicated, active, purposeful training session where you're eliminating certain unwholesome qualities from the mind and you're cultivating certain wholesome qualities in the mind. So you'd like the mind to be attentive and alert during the meditation. So by having the sternum up and the shoulders back, it'll help keep the mind attentive and alert, but it'll also make it easy for you to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. So we're going to start with the chanting. Then you're going to hear that I'm going to come in with some guidance to be guiding you during the meditation. Then there's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet and we're all meditating together. Then we're going to come out of that with some more chanting. And that's where I'll start today's class, helping you guys to understand the teachings of the Buddha. Now, during this period of time of quietness, I'm sure you're going to hear occasional sounds. You might hear a car go by, a bird chirping, a dog barking, someone might cough or sneeze. You guys will learn today that if you have annoyment or frustration, it's coming from your own mind. It's the mind craving permanence. So you're not going to be able to be in meditation where it's permanently quiet. You're going to hear occasional sounds. So when you hear any kind of sound, it's going to arise, it's going to change, and it's going to fade away. But if you crave permanent silence, when you live in an impermanent world, you'll find that it's going to be challenging for you because your mind's going to be annoyed or frustrated. So when you hear any kind of sounds during meditation, just remain at peace and knowing that that's normal, that there's going to be sounds, and these sounds are going to arise, change, and fade away. And that way you can maintain your peace and your joy. So if you'd like to join in the meditation, I'm going to start with the chanting, and then I'll come back in with the guidance after that. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanang Abhivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato สัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมะภะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมะเกวาโหตังมหาเกวันหังอภิวาเตมิสวากขาโตมหาเกวัตตาธัมโมดามังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเกวัตโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมะเกวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิจาจารนังสัมโมโนสคาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสรังพุทโธภาควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to all of you guys. Nice to see everyone here this afternoon. Welcome to everyone online as well. This is called breathing mindfulness meditation. This is one of the primary forms of training that the Buddha used, among other things, to be able to help him get to this enlightened mental state. You wouldn't be able to just meditate your way to enlightenment, but you also wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment without meditation either. One of the biggest myths about the life story of the Buddha is people think he sat under a tree, he meditated, and then he instantly got to enlightenment. This isn't actually true. It was gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. And you know this to be true because everything you've ever done in life has been the same way. Whether it's to learn to read, write, and speak a certain language, it's been gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. Whether it's any job or occupation that you might have, it was gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. So enlightenment is the same way. So we start each one of our classes with meditation like this. And then in the various courses and retreats that I share, I go in depth and detail, explaining to you all the ins and outs of meditation. This isn't that type of course. This is just an introduction. We're going to introduce you to the teachings of the Buddha, but understand there's more detail around meditation that you would need to be able to understand as you move forward on the journey to enlightenment. But for now, just understand this is one of the primary forms of training that he used among many other things. He used various tools and techniques to help his mind get to enlightenment, but this is one of the primary forms. So what I'm going to do to get started is I'm going to help you guys to understand what is a Buddha, because in terms of being introduced to the teachings of the Buddha, it'd be nice to know what is a Buddha, because oftentimes people don't even know what a Buddha is. Then I'm going to share with you what are the teachings of the Buddha and what aren't the teachings of the Buddha, because you're going to see many misunderstandings in the world. You may have already been exposed to many misunderstandings about his teachings. Then, as I mentioned, we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to share with you the very first teaching of the Buddha, where you can have a real breakthrough to understanding what's causing these discontent feelings so that then you can actually eliminate them. As we go through our course, I'm going to be stopping at a few points and opening up to questions that you guys might have. If you guys have questions, either here or online, you guys can ask questions. If you're here at the temple and you'd like to ask questions, we have microphones in the white bowl there in the center of the room. All you need to do is get a microphone, take it back to your seat, press the gray button. You're going to see the lights come on, and then you can just hold it up to your chin, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online as well. If you speak here without a microphone, they won't be able to hear you online. And then you can keep these microphones with you because you might have more than one question, or someone around you might have a question, and you can just share the microphone. And if you're not using it, if you could turn it off, that way we won't get feedback through the speakers. And then for anybody who's online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section. I'll be able to see that. Or if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and ask any and all questions that you like that way. So to get us started about what is a Buddha, there's three main criteria that make a Buddha a Buddha. And then there's some others as well, which I'll teach you guys. The first primary criteria of what makes a Buddha is that they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. Remember, enlightenment is a mental state that you attain in this life where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. You no longer experience any discontent feelings. By the time you get to enlightenment, you don't have any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All the conditions that are causing those feelings have been uprooted and eliminated from the mind. In an individual who's a Buddha, they would have figured out how to do that by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. The second criteria is that they will dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings, and countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then the third criteria is that they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. So this is the three primary criteria of what makes a Buddha a Buddha. Then there's additional criteria as well. An individual who's a Buddha, they will have a profound memory, even in the unenlightened state, because by the time you get to enlightenment, you're going to have focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory, because your mind's going to be performing optimally. But even an individual who is not enlightened, that is going to become a Buddha, they actually have a deep, profound memory. This is one of the ways that they're actually able to get to enlightenment, the primary way that they're able to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. An average individual, they have a certain limited capacity in their mind. It's kind of like a hard drive. You might have 500 gigabytes or 1 terabyte of hard drive space. And then when you get to the maximum capacity, you need to delete old files in order to store new files. That's why, like right now, if you were to talk about your childhood, you probably have some memories of your childhood, but it's just like spotty memories, where in the last 5 or 10 years, you can probably recall pretty much all the things that you've been doing in the last 5 or 10 years. But your childhood, you just have spotty memories because you had to delete those files in order to store these new files, because you have a limited capacity in your mind. An individual who's going to become a Buddha, they actually don't have that. They have an unlimited capacity to remember countless details about their current life in their past lives too. And they accumulate all this wisdom to get to the point where they can actually apply it in their last life to be able to then experience enlightenment. So this is one of the criteria of what makes a Buddha, is that they have a deep, profound memory. They have an unlimited capacity to remember countless details about their lives. Then this individual who's a Buddha can quickly determine the condition of somebody else's mind, and then they can provide them teachings that can actually help them to be able to move their mind to enlightenment. They don't just step into someone's life and give them unsolicited guidance, but for people who are students, they would be able to observe the quality of that person's mind and then be able to offer them teachings that are going to help them to progress on the journey to enlightenment. Then an individual who's a Buddha, they're a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. They have a deep practice of their teachings. Because an individual who's a Buddha, they understand that their students are learning through their spoken words, but they're learning just as much through their actions as well. So whatever they teach, they're going to be practicing those exact same things as well, because their students are learning from the way that they interact in the world. So a Buddha is going to be a living, breathing, walking example of his teachings. And these are the main criteria of what makes a Buddha a Buddha. We refer to this individual as a fully, perfectly enlightened one. This type of individual is very rare in the world. You're going to find some people that will tell you everybody is a Buddha. And this isn't true. The Buddha never actually taught that. He explained how rare it is for an individual to come into the world and meet these criteria. So you're going to need teachers and guides to be able to help you on the path. You're not going to be able to figure this out by yourself, right? So this is a very rare individual. And the last one that the world's currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. And since that time frame, the world isn't currently aware of anybody that has met these criteria. So we refer to this individual as a fully, perfectly enlightened one, because by the time they get to enlightenment, what they know is the path to enlightenment. Their mind doesn't have any kind of extra baggage around. Where somebody who's gotten to enlightenment with the help of a teacher or a guide, they might have gotten to enlightenment, but 80, 90%, maybe 95% of what they've been doing has led to their enlightenment. But they might have 5%, 10% of things that they're still keeping around, maybe just out of respect for their teacher, that didn't actually contribute to their enlightenment, but they're still doing those particular things. So that's why we don't refer to every enlightened being as fully, perfectly enlightened. But an individual who's gotten to enlightenment as a Buddha, they don't have teachers and guides. So if they try a certain meditation and it doesn't work to help improve the condition of their mind, they'll discard it because they know that that didn't work. So by the time they get to enlightenment, what they know is the path to enlightenment, inside and out, backwards and forwards. And they spend the rest of their life illuminating that path for everybody else to be able to understand what it takes to be able to get to enlightenment. They dedicate their life to helping others to be able to experience that same enlightened mental state. So we refer to this individual as fully, perfectly enlightened because they understand the path very clearly and they don't have this extra baggage around that an average enlightened being would have a few things that they're still doing that didn't actually contribute to their enlightenment. So a Buddha is an individual who meets these criteria. And as you can see, this is very rare in the world. Then in terms of what the teachings of the Buddha are, is it's a path to attaining enlightenment through purification of the mind. What the Buddha discovered is he discovered there's these individual pollutions that are in the mind, and then he discovered these tools and techniques of how to uproot those and eliminate them out of the mind. As somebody is working to purify their mind using these tools and techniques, they're going to experience a mental state in this life, or it can also be experienced at death as well, where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. The ideal would be to attain it in this life, because then you'll experience the rest of this life in this enlightened mental state. But the next best option would be to attain it at death. But ideally, you would attain it during your lifetime. When you get to enlightenment, not only is the mind peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, but you're not experiencing any of these discontent feelings. You've heard me say this list already at least 2 or 3 times in the class. All of that has been eliminated because you've uprooted the causes and conditions that are producing it. It's the mind's pollutions that are actually causing these. So when you purify the mind and you get rid of those pollutions, you'll no longer experience these discontent feelings. And because you've gotten rid of the pollutions, the mind is now performing optimally. You'll have a high degree of focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory, because your mind's no longer polluted with these pollutions that are in the mind. You'll notice that you'll have deep wisdom about the world around you that other people don't have, that things that will become very simple and easy and straightforward for you, other people will really struggle with those things. In the unenlightened state, you'll have certain struggles and difficulties in life. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll have deep wisdom about the world around you. You'll no longer be struggling and having difficulties. Everything is very straightforward for you in your day-to-day life. You'll be able to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to every single person in the world. Right now, that's probably a challenge for you, right? If you show up to the airport and maybe your flight's delayed, you might be disgruntled with the ticket counter or something like that. Or maybe if your taxi cab doesn't show up on time, maybe you're frustrated or agitated, or maybe if somebody steps on your foot when you're walking in a large crowd, maybe you're agitated or annoyed or something like this. By the time you get to enlightenment, you'll be able to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to every single person. Right now, you might have a certain amount of bitterness and hostility and harshness and resentment in your mind, particularly towards the people that you're closest to. Maybe your parents or your siblings or your children or your life partner, people like this. Those people, you tend to have the most challenges in those relationships. And you'll understand why by the time we get to the end of today's class. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to everyone around you. Again, right now you might find that to be challenging, but by the time you uproot these pollutions out of the mind and purify the mind, you'll find that to be very easy and very straightforward. It's effortless. You're not going to be causing harm to others, because anytime you put out harm, this harm is just going to come back to you. And you will have seen that truth by the time you make your way to enlightenment, and you're choosing to no longer cause harm, and you understand how to not cause harm because you've deeply understood the natural laws that the Buddha taught. So because of this, your personal and professional relationships will really be blossoming. They'll be at ease. As I mentioned, right now, probably certain relationships you find to be a struggle. They can be really challenging for you. And if that's the case, that's understandable. You're not a bad person. You haven't done anything wrong. It's just that the mind hasn't been trained. It hasn't experienced this purification. So by the time you get to enlightenment, your personal, professional relationships will be really blossoming. They'll be at ease. You'll get to the point where you're not even in a bad mood anymore. It's physically impossible for an individual who's gotten to enlightenment to actually experience even a bad mood. The way this is happening is through eliminating what's called craving, anger, and ignorance. When the Buddha talks about the pollutions in the mind, he talks about these 10 individual pollutions. We refer to them as the 10 fetters. This is the deepest level of detail that you'll hear from the Buddha about the pollutions in the mind. They're referred to as fetters because during the lifetime of the Buddha, if you were an individual that they were trying to keep confined to a certain area, like a criminal or a prisoner, they would attach a fetter around your ankle. This was a shackle and a chain and a ball. And now they would just keep you turned out in this field and you would stay confined in that area. That was called a fetter, this shackle and chain and ball. So when the Buddha discovers these 10 pollutions in the mind, he refers to them as fetters because it's keeping the mind trapped in this unenlightened state where it keeps experiencing anger, sadness, frustration over and over and over again. But when we talk about it from a high level, we refer to it as craving, anger, and ignorance. These are referred to as the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots or the 3 fires. What craving is, I'll just give you guys a heads up to kind of introduce you to this. What craving is where the mind is longing, yearning. It's chasing after the objects of its affection. It's trying to seek satisfaction externally. It's almost like an unquenchable thirst that the mind thinks that the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction. So the mind chases it and chases it and chases it and chases it. The mind craves for things to be permanent. And if the mind gets what it wants, it gets pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. But if the mind doesn't get what it wants, what it's craving, what it's longing, yearning for, then it experiences painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, and others. So the mind is forming its inner feelings based on some external condition. So the mind's craving and longing, yearning, it's having what's called conditional feelings, that based on some condition, it will then experience a feeling. So because of the mind's craving, maybe someone's craving for it to be sunny outside. And now when it's sunny outside, they'll be really happy about that. They'll be really excited because I'm going to go hiking. I'm going to go whitewater rafting. I'm going to go outside and go to the park or bike riding or whatever it is. So you get really happy and excited. But if you went and took a shower and you come outside and now you see it's raining, well, you'll be frustrated or agitated or annoyed. This is because of the mind's craving, desire, attachment, the mind's longing, yearning. It based its inner feelings on the sun. And because the sun isn't permanent, your happiness is not permanent either. So that means when it changed from sun to rain, your mind now experiences the painful feelings, where the only thing that's actually occurred is change. That's it. Right? So when the mind has craving, desire, attachment, it can only be happy when it's getting what it wants. Then when that anger is arising, which is the second pollution, the second poison, when that anger is arising because of its cravings, the mind firmly believes it's something because of something external. The mind firmly believes it's mom and dad that are making you angry, or brothers and sisters that are annoying you, or your boss is frustrating you. And what the mind's going to tend to do is become unskillful. It's going to want to push people away, or it's going to want to push away the situation. This is called aversion, where you might have pushed friends or family out of your life. Or you might be bitter and harsh and hostile through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. It's almost like an animal growling and roaring at another animal. And now this person might decide to leave out of your life because they're not interested in being around the bitterness and harshness and hostility. Or the third thing you might do is you'll put your expectations on people and try to pressure them or control them to do things your way. And this is the mind trying to get its cravings fulfilled because it thinks if I can just get things my way, then everything will be perfect. So the mind tries to push away, be bitter, harsh, and hostile, almost fearing people into doing things your way. Or the mind will try to put its expectations on people. And people might even be doing this to you too. You might see that people are pushing you away, or they're being bitter, harsh, and hostile to you, or they're putting their expectations on you. So when that anger is arising, it's uncomfortable for the mind, those painful feelings, and the mind doesn't know how to deal with this. It firmly believes something external is causing it. So that's why it becomes unskillful, and it's trying to get its cravings fulfilled without realizing that that's what it's doing. And the whole reason why the mind is doing this is because of the third one. People often translate this as ignorance. I prefer to use the phrase unknowing of true reality because we're translating the words of the Buddha into English, and an enlightened being isn't going to refer to someone as ignorant or stupid. That would be a derogatory way of referring to someone. Instead, the way you can think about this third one is the unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom, confusion, misunderstanding, misperception, or confusion. The mind in the unenlightened state just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. It will firmly believe that other people are causing you to be angry until you peer into this and you see the truth for yourself. And that's what the Four Noble Truths are going to help you to do. When I walk you through that later, you'll be able to see very clearly what is actually causing things like anger and frustration and all these other feelings. This is just a little bit of a little introduction to these three poisons. So you can understand that there's this craving, this longing, yearning. The mind gets what it wants. It gets happy, gets pleasant feelings. If it doesn't get what it wants, it gets those painful feelings. One of the things that can happen is anger can arise. When anger is coming in, it pushes away. It's bitter, harsh, and hostile and put expectations on people. And where this is all coming from is its lack of wisdom. It's confusion and misunderstanding about how the world truly works. So while we call it craving, anger, and ignorance, it's really because of ignorance that craving and anger continues in the mind. If it wasn't for this lack of wisdom, the individual would have eliminated their craving and anger. And that's why on the teachings of the Buddha, on the path to enlightenment, there's no belief in his teachings. Because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it because somebody convinced you to believe it, or you convinced yourself to believe it. In order to be able to get to enlightenment, you need to have wisdom where you know the truth for yourself. So when someone like me is talking, or you're reading these books that I write and things like this, you don't ever believe anything on the path to enlightenment. You're not a follower. You're not a devotee or anything like that. You're an independent practitioner looking to cultivate wisdom about the world around you. And the only way that you can cultivate wisdom is to learn something intellectually. Investigate and examine it intellectually. Then you reflect on it to verify whether it's true or it's false. And then you practice those teachings, integrating them into your day-to-day life, and then you can see what's actually working. So when we talk about awakening to enlightenment, what you're doing is you're eliminating these pollutions of the mind and cultivating wisdom about the natural laws of existence, namely a natural law called the natural law of Gama. You might have heard this referred to as karma. This is the Sanskrit version of this. This is just a different language, where the original teachings of the Buddha are in the Pali language. So people who study the original teachings of the Buddha will usually use the word karma. This isn't anything mystical or magical. It's not about who's to blame or who's at fault. It's not about punishments and rewards. There's no being who's overseeing this and controlling what you experience. It's none of those kinds of things. It's about cause and effect, or action and result. Whenever you make certain decisions, either wisely or unwisely, you're going to experience a certain result. That result is called Gama. It's either going to be wholesome Gama or wholesome results, or unwholesome Gama or unwholesome results, based on whether your decision is wise or unwise. So this is why you need the wisdom of these natural laws so you can see what is wise that leads to wholesome karma or wholesome results, and what is unwise, so that then you can make decisions accordingly, because that's what leads to unwholesome karma or unwholesome results. So what you're doing on the path to enlightenment is you're cultivating wisdom about the natural laws, because when you lack wisdom of the natural laws and how the world's truly constructed, you'll find it to be difficult and you'll have struggles and difficulties. It's just like when we grew up. We didn't understand the natural law of gravity. So we struggled and we had difficulties. When we were little kids, we fell down, we hit our head, we bumped our elbows, we cried and cried. We had blood coming out of different places. We broke our toys. We were so upset, right? This natural law of gravity affected us, whether we were aware of it or not. And because of our lack of wisdom of this natural law, we struggled in the world. But slowly but surely, we gained wisdom of this natural law. And by the time we were 10, 12, 14 years old, we might say that we were fully awake to the natural law of gravity. And now we started making different decisions. We started tying our shoes a little bit tighter. We started looking at the surface of the sidewalk as we were walking. We stopped being so giddy and bouncing around like a little kid all the time. And now we're at the point where we can climb ladders, we can ride bicycles, we can get on airplanes and fly all over the world because we're fully awake to the natural law of gravity, that we make wise decisions regarding this natural law. And we never believed in the natural law of gravity. We can see it for ourselves, right? We know it exists. There it is. We're not believing that it exists. We know with 100% certainty that this natural law is there. So the same thing is true about other natural laws. If you lack wisdom of them, you will go around the world making unwise decisions, not realizing that that's what you're doing. And then when you experience unwholesome results in your life, you might blame other people for those things. Or you might say it's good luck or bad luck. Or you might say it's destiny or fate. Or some people might think it's God that's controlling what you experience on a day-to-day basis. Or nowadays, some people say it's the universe is controlling what you experience. So if you think things are good luck or bad luck or destiny or fate or God or some entity called the universe, or that it's other people that are causing you to experience certain things, this is to not understand true reality, because those things aren't actually true. They don't actually truly function that way. That's not the way the world truly functions. It's your decisions that are leading to any particular result. And when you go out into the world with a lack of wisdom, you will tend to make unwise decisions and you will experience unwholesome results. And that's where, because of the unenlightened mind's ego, it's got to be somebody else. It's not me that's causing all of this. It's everybody else that's causing all of these things, right? So the mind will typically say it's good luck, bad luck, destiny or fate, or it's God or some entity called the universe, or maybe it's other people that are causing these things. But you need to be able to peer into this, to be able to learn, examine, and investigate, reflect, independently verify, and then practice to see the truth for yourself. Because it's certain decisions that we make that lead to any particular result. And the beauty about understanding this is that if there's anything that you don't particularly care for that's going on in your life, all you need to do is cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you will experience different results. But if it's other people that are causing what you experience, you can't do that because you can't change other people. Or if it's good luck or bad luck, or destiny or fate, or if it's God or some entity called the universe, you're just locked in. You can't change anything. But if you come to understand that it's your own decisions that are leading to what you experience on a day-to-day basis, that's beautiful, because this is empowering. Because now you can just cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you'll experience different results. If you need to see this truth just here as part of an introduction to be able to see that it's your own decisions that are leading to any result that you experience, just ask yourself these questions. Who chose where you're sitting right now? Who chose the clothing that you're wearing today? Who chose the hairstyle that you have, or the lack of, right? Who chose this, right? Who chose whether or not you ate lunch today or not? Who chose your friends that you spend time with? Who chose where you live? Who chose the job that you have, right? We could go on and on and on and on, right? You can understand that it's your decisions that are leading to all of these things, right? So if there's anything that you don't particularly care for that's going on in your life, cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you'll experience different results. And this is part of the path to enlightenment, is cultivating wisdom about this natural law of karma, not believing in it. And remember, it's not punishments and rewards. It's not mystical or magical. It's not about who's to blame or who's at fault. There's no entity that's overseeing this. It's no black cloud that's following you around, right? It's not a bank account that you make withdrawals and deposits out of. It's the results of your decisions. Like for right now, you're sitting here, you're not causing any harm to anybody. You're just listening to someone speak. That's why no harm is coming to you, right? That's the natural law of cause and effect. You're not causing harm, so no harm's coming to you. But if you were to poke the person in the eyes who's sitting next to you, now you're causing harm, and now there's going to be some harm that comes to you. They're probably going to swat your hand away or something like that, right? So this cause and effect, it's the results of decisions that you make. And the more you cultivate wisdom about this natural law, the more you'll be able to understand it and then make wise decisions. Because if you were walking down the beach and the wind was blowing in your face and you were kicking up the sand and you were kicking it on other people and you were kicking it up in the air and it was blowing back in your eyes, you'd be like, I don't like this very much. What am I doing that's leading to this? And how can I stop this from occurring? Well, let me just stop kicking up the sand, and then I won't experience sand coming back in my face. So with that wisdom, as a child, we learn, stop kicking up sand, right? But the thing is there's a lot more than just sand that we can potentially kick up. So this natural law of karma is helping you to understand how the world is. The Buddha didn't explain the way the world should be, and that if everybody follows certain rules and commandments, then the world will become a better place. He's explaining to you the way the world is. And by understanding how the world is, now you can navigate it more peacefully. Just like with the natural law of gravity. Now that we understand how the world truly is, we can make wiser decisions regarding that. So that's what the Buddha is teaching you, and you're training your mind to cultivate wisdom and acquire wisdom about this natural law so you can see it more and more clearly. That's what it means to awaken, is to cultivate wisdom about the natural laws of existence. The natural law of karma is like an umbrella, and all the other natural laws are under that, but this is the main natural law that you're cultivating wisdom about. The teachings of the Buddha are timeless. That what he taught 2,500 years ago is just as applicable today as it was 2,500 years ago, because all he's doing is describing these natural laws, and these natural laws don't change. They're the same natural laws that existed 2,500 years ago. So he spoke very clear, very concise, and very precise. You don't need to interpret his words. You don't need to figure out what he said or how he said it. It's very clear the way that he taught. So his teachings are timeless. He did teach about the cycle of rebirth, and he taught about these 5 realms of existence, of hell, the animal realm, the realm of afflicted spirits, the human realm, and the heavenly realm. As you've heard me share, there's no belief in the teachings of the Buddha, including these things, the cycle of rebirth and the 5 realms of existence. You can actually independently verify this. You might not have the wisdom of how to do that right now, but as you progress on your journey, you'll be able to learn more about how to actually independently verify these things. In our book series, we have 13 books, and in volume 11, chapter 105, I list out 17 different criteria of how to independently verify the cycle of rebirth. But it's in volume 11, chapter 105 for a reason. Because typically when you first get started on the path to enlightenment, you set this aside, right? There's no need for you to peer into the cycle of rebirth so early in your journey. Because whatever happened in the past, it's in the past. It doesn't matter anymore. What may or may not happen in the future, it's in the future. Doesn't matter right now. What's important is right now you're a human being and you have the ability to train your mind and get to the point where it's completely peaceful and joyful. But in the future, there's an opportunity for you to be able to study that. And if you'd like to study it ahead of time, you're more than welcome to. But there's all this other understanding that you need to cultivate. That's why it's in chapter 105 of volume 11. But the reason why he taught this is he taught this for a reason. First of all, is because it's true. It's true reality. An individual needs to understand true reality in order to be able to get to enlightenment. But the reason why he taught you this is because if you're training your mind with all of his teachings and you're getting rid of this pollution out of your mind, if you start having memories of your past lives and you didn't understand that that's what it was, it could really shake you up. So for example, let's just say you're having vivid memories of being murdered. And this is like recurring memories that are going on in your mind, and they just keep reoccurring over and over and over again. You know, it didn't happen in this life, but that could really shake you up if you just kept having these vivid memories of being murdered, right? Well, if you understand that this is past life memories, you can just set it aside and let it go. You don't need to keep thinking about it. You can actually train your mind to let that go. Or for some people, as they're getting rid of this pollution out of the mind, they can actually see some of these beings, like the hell beings, the afflicted spirits or ghosts, heavenly beings. These are also formless beings. They don't have physical form. Some people can actually see them. And if you started seeing these beings and you didn't understand that this is true reality, this is the way the world truly works, it could really shake you up, and you could potentially feel like you're going insane or crazy. And some people can actually even hear these beings, hell beings, afflicted spirits, and heavenly beings. They're all in the same time and space as us. Oftentimes people think hell beings are deep down in the core of the earth somewhere, and heavenly beings are way up in the sky. They're all in the same time and space as us. Just like there's a human being sitting in this chair, if I got up and left, there could be an animal that came and sat here, right? A dog could walk in the door, or there could be an ant, or some other being, a spider could come and sit here, right? We're all in the same time and space. Same thing with these other beings. So some people can actually hear communication from these beings, and people would think that they are going crazy if they didn't understand that that was true reality. And just like if you're in a restaurant and 2 tables over, somebody could be speaking really loud and you can ignore that conversation. The same thing is true with these beings too. You can train your mind to just ignore that conversation. But if you didn't understand how to do that and that this is true reality, again, you could think you're going quite crazy. So the Buddha taught these things for a reason, but I suggest that people set them aside, because it's not important when you first get started to be able to peer into this. And that's why the first teaching that I'm going to start you out with is the Four Noble Truths. But just understand, this is part of his teachings, and he taught it for a reason. Sometimes people think that the Buddha did not teach about God. You might hear people go as far as saying that the Buddha denied the existence of God, or that he rejected God. This isn't actually true. For someone who says this, they haven't peered into the teachings of the Buddha very closely, because you can see very clearly that the Buddha did teach about this being of God, but he didn't put God at the center of his teachings, because it's not God that determines whether you get to enlightenment or not. It's you that determines whether you get to enlightenment or not. So he put you at the center of his teachings, not God. So there isn't any kind of worshiping of God, or begging God for things, or being afraid of God. It's not God that's punishing you and rewarding you or anything like that. But oftentimes this is what people have been taught. So the Buddha did teach about this being, but he doesn't put this being at the center of his teachings. So you would be able to get to enlightenment with a relationship with God if somebody would like to do that, but you're going to need to potentially unlearn certain things that you've been taught. If you've been taught that God punishes you and rewards you, or you've been taught to pray to God and ask for God's benefits and things like this, or if you've been taught to fear God, things like this, you're going to need to know that that's not actually true. But you could also get to enlightenment without a relationship with God too. That's a potential as well. But again, you're just going to need to understand not to have anger and hatred towards this being, because sometimes people have anger and hatred towards this being. So he did teach about this being of God because people understood this being as part of their life, and he needed to help them to understand how to get to the point where the mind's free and it's peaceful and joyful, where it's not all bound up based in any type of difficulties and struggles with this particular being, with what's going on in their own mind. So the Buddha did teach about this being of God. So the largest, most complete collection of the teachings of the Buddha are in what we call the Pali Canon. This is 45 books that are about this thick. It's called the Pali Canon because it's using the Pali language, but we've translated this into other languages. At this point, we study it in English, but there's other languages like Thai and other languages that people have translated it into. So this is the documentation of the discourses of the Buddha. The Buddha, during his lifetime, he spoke orally. Everything he spoke, everything he taught was spoken, that they didn't have the technology to write things down during his lifetime. It existed in China, but 2,500 years ago, during the lifetime of the Buddha, from 563 BC to 483 BC, that technology hadn't made its way to that region of the world. The Buddha was born in modern day Nepal, and he taught in Northeast India. So that technology hadn't made its way to that region of the world. Now, you might not see writing something down as technology, but 2,500 years ago, that was technology. And just like technology today kind of rolls throughout the world, it's the same thing back then too. So everything he taught was oral. And the way that enlightenment works is by the time you get to enlightenment, you will never forget the teachings that it took for you to get to enlightenment. So by the time the Buddha died, there were countless people who had gotten to enlightenment, and 500 of them got together after his death because the technology had made its way to that region of the world, and they started documenting his teachings. And they agreed that, yes, this is what had led to their enlightenment. And that's what we study as part of the Pali Canon. But usually the 45 volumes of books, it's too comprehensive for somebody to learn all 45 volumes. So what our community has done is we've consolidated it into this book series called The Words of the Buddha, The Path to Enlightenment, Revealing the Hidden. And that's what we make available to all of our students for free at no cost. That's why I call it Revealing the Hidden, because most people in the world, they don't study with the original words of the Buddha. Not intentionally, but these teachings have been hidden for a very long time because it's very expensive to print out 45 volumes of books, right? Here in Thailand, if you were to get a full copy of the Pali Canon, it would be about 3 months of your salary, right? The average person would need to spend that. You probably don't own any book collections worth 3 months of your salary. So what we've been able to do with modern technology is consolidate it and then make it available for free, that people can download it from the internet. They can take it and go print it if they like. They can get printed versions here by reimbursing us for the printing cost, or they can just order it on Amazon. And that way you'll have the original words of the Buddha. And I know this sounds strange for me to encourage you to study with the original words of the Buddha, but the vast majority of the world doesn't study with his original words. They don't even know how to access it. They don't even know where it's at. So the vast majority of the world, they don't study with his teachings. And there's about 500 million people who consider themselves Buddhist. Even the average temple doesn't study the original words of the Buddha. I've been to over 200 temples in my lifetime, and I've only ever been to one that shares the original words of the Buddha. And if you do the math on this, that's less than 1%, right? So there's so many misunderstandings in the world because people aren't studying with the original words of the Buddha. And I would encourage you that if you're going to embark on this journey, to make sure you study with reliable translations of the original words of the Buddha. And that's what's actually going to lead to your enlightenment. And then lastly, just to finish off, what are the teachings of the Buddha before I open up to questions from you guys, is what the teachings of the Buddha are is to heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt ever again. That's what his teachings are. And I'll share it again just to make sure. The teachings of the Buddha are to heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt ever again. By the time you get to enlightenment, you will never experience any kind of painful feelings in the mind whatsoever. It's physically impossible for you. But what people think is hurting them is external. That's what they think. So people will go around the world trying to change the outside world, never really focusing on the inner world. You might have grown up learning how to clean the body, but you might not have learned how to clean the mind. There's more to this being than just the body. If you went around and you didn't take a shower for a few days, a few weeks, a few months, or a few years, you'd be pretty uncomfortable. Well, if you've been going around life without cleaning your mind, you can understand why there's stress and anxiety and why there's uncomfortableness in the mind, because you haven't addressed this full being. But now you're in a place that understands how to clean the mind, right? So our parents taught us how to clean the body, and we figured out how to do that by the time we were 10, 12, 14 years old. But if you didn't learn how to clean the mind, this is the reason why you have that uncomfortableness in the mind. So the Buddhist teachings are to heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt ever again. And you can experience the peace and the joy through training of the mind. So I'm going to pause here and see what questions you guys have. And then I'm going to share with you guys what the teachings of the Buddha are not. Okay, do you guys have any questions on what the teachings of the Buddha are? Yes, sir. We have microphones over here in the white bowl. If you could get a microphone, that'd be great. You just need to press the gray button and just wait like a second or two, and then it'll turn on.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
I guess my question is, when we're talking about enlightenment, it seems to be, from what you're describing, it sounds like a kind of permanent like change to your mind or how you see things, and you have to meditate to kind of to get there. But is it actually, there's a lot of kind of like, one of the noble truths I believe it's about impermanence. So can you lose enlightenment, or is that it is really it's very special? It seems to be something that's like permanent when there are a lot of other things are not permanent.
Sure. Yeah. So oftentimes people think the Buddha taught everything is impermanent, and this isn't actually true. What he taught is part of the universal truths. It's not a noble truth. It's what we call the universal truths, is that he taught that all conditioned objects are going to arise, they're going to change, and they're going to fade away. This is impermanence, that everything around you in the material world is impermanent. So anything you can see, hear, smell, taste, anything that comes in contact with the body, or any thoughts or ideas that go through your mind, these are all impermanent. So the material world and everything around you is impermanent. That's what's called a conditioned object, that it's going to arise based on some condition. It will arise, it will change, and then it will fade away. These are called conditioned objects. But then there's something in the world called a unconditioned object. Unconditioned objects do not arise, they do not change, and they do not fade away. They are permanent. So the natural laws are unconditioned. They don't arise, they don't change, and they don't fade away. That's why the teachings of the Buddha are timeless. What he taught 2,500 years ago is just as applicable today as it was 2,500 years ago, because these natural laws don't change. Now, people's memories and the books, those things are all impermanent, but the natural laws themselves haven't changed. By the time you get to enlightenment, your mind is unconditioned. In the unenlightened state, you have a conditioned mind, that you have certain pollutions that are in your mind. These are the causes and conditions that are producing things like anger, sadness, frustration, and others. The feelings are going to arise, they're going to change, and they're going to fade away because they're based on some condition. Craving, anger, and ignorance, those pollutions. But by the time you purify your mind and you get rid of the conditions in your mind is now unconditioned. So there doesn't need to be any condition met in order for there to be happiness and joy in the mind. So in the unenlightened state, you'll have conditional happiness, that you get a raise at work, you'll be happy. The sun is out, you may be happy. I don't know for sure, but maybe if your mom's coming to see you, maybe you'll be happy. Or if your mom cooks you that wonderful meal that you like as a child, maybe you'll be happy. There needs to be some condition for the mind to be happy. That is temporary happiness because it arises, changes, and fades away, and it's based on some condition, that craving, that longing, yearning. By the time you get to enlightenment, those conditions no longer exist in the mind. The mind is now unconditioned. The pollution is out of the mind. So this happiness and all the other qualities that we talk about with enlightenment, they are permanent. They exist in the mind permanently, and there doesn't need to be any condition met in order for those to exist. So in the unenlightened state, you'll experience conditioned feelings that arise, change, and fade away. In the enlightened mental state, you'll experience unconditioned mental qualities that are permanent. So in the unenlightened state, you'll wake up and be happy when it's sunny, and you'll be sad when it's raining. In the enlightened mental state, you're already happy before you ever woke up. There doesn't need to be any condition met in order for there to be happiness in the mind. So you're beyond the conditionality of the feelings that you experience in the unenlightened state. And this is what's called unconditioned object, that it doesn't arise, it doesn't change, and it doesn't fade away. And this is why enlightenment is permanent. And this is in matching with what the Buddha taught about conditioned objects and unconditioned objects. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. That one's already on. The mic's already on.
Oh, it's on?
Yeah, there it is.
So can you talk a little bit about people who want to inquire about themselves
Mhm.
and about things that they've experienced, let's say in their childhood, traumas, and choose to take different paths to inquire about those things and heal those things in themselves through, for instance, therapy. All sorts of different sorts of therapy, not just one form of therapy, and how these teachings that you share, and Buddhism in particular, views that, if at all, and maybe a little comparison in terms of whether one could do those types of inquiries through just Buddhism and Buddhist studies,
Sure.
as opposed to anything else. Thank you.
Sure. So I can't speak on Buddhism as a whole because everybody has different opinions and views about these kinds of things. But what I can do is speak to you based on my experience. So based on what I know is things that are in the modern mental health field with psychology and so forth, with therapy, what they're typically teaching you to do is how to cope with these feelings, is how to manage your feelings. That's typically what they're talking about, which is vastly different than what the Buddha is teaching you. The Buddha is teaching you how to eliminate the causes and conditions that are producing them. I would suggest that most modern psychologists would probably say it's impossible to eliminate your things like anger and frustration and sadness and so forth because they haven't been trained in the same way that someone who understands the path to enlightenment has been trained. If you train in the path to enlightenment, you can get to the point where you understand not only that it's possible to eliminate these things, but you can actually experience it for yourself. And you can see that it's true because your mind knows what it's like to be angry and frustrated and all those other feelings. And when you're no longer experiencing that, and it's been 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and so forth, you'll know that your mind is actually enlightened at that point, and you'll know how you actually did that. So if somebody chose to do therapy or any of these other things, that's a choice for them to make. The teachings of the Buddha aren't about telling you what you should or shouldn't do. There's not one person at the top of Buddhism telling everybody what they should or shouldn't be doing. It's your life, it's your decisions, and it's your results. So if somebody chooses to explore modern therapy and all of that, and they find benefit in it, great, that's wonderful, pleased for them. But if they're interested in learning how to eliminate their discontent feelings, that's where the teachings of the Buddha come in. Because you mentioned something like trauma, right? As we grow up and we experience different things, they've used this word trauma to talk about something that's happened in the past that you're experiencing feelings about today. Right? All this is the mind's clinging to this experience, and it's forming feelings today based on something that happened in the past. By the time you get to enlightenment, your mind won't be doing that anymore. You can get to the point where you don't cling to these experiences and form feelings about them today. Sometimes people think that trauma is permanent, and once you had a traumatic experience, you'll never be able to overcome it. But this isn't actually true. By the time you get to enlightenment, you will have had certain traumatic things that happened in your past, or we might refer to it as trauma, and you'll remember that those things have happened, but your mind is no longer forming feelings on that today, because your mind doesn't cling to this experience and then base its feelings today on something that occurred in the past. So this is what is possible through training of the mind on this path to enlightenment. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I have I hope it's okay if I spin on what you just said here. I just thought, is there, in your view, a difference then between what we might call today trauma? I notice that's a very popular word nowadays, versus something like active harm. So let's, in a thought experiment, let's say that I have an abusive partner, and if that partner is actively abusive to me, instead of just saying, well, I've reached total equanimity, I've meditated for many years, I'm not enlightened, but I reached a state where I can take it, I don't really cling to it, because I see that's what it seems to me to be a corruption of the Dhamma in that way, that we have corporations nowadays mistreating their employees, and they say, oh, we suffer because you're tracking us, we don't have time to pee and all of that. And instead of fixing that, they say, oh, you can meditate, right? So what would be the difference between I assume that if I have an abusive partner, I should end that somehow. I should talk to them to make them stop or leave that partner. So you're not saying not to do that, right? And where the Buddha's teaching comes in, would that be more like, after doing that, I wouldn't hate them, I wouldn't judge them, I wouldn't fight back, I wouldn't retaliate, I wouldn't punish, but I would leave the situation, right?
So the teachings of the Buddha aren't giving you like a black and white decision tree that's like, if this happens, do this. And if this happens, do that. That's not what he's doing, because that would be a permanent answer for every single situation, right? Because you could have, say, for example, a partner who, say, cheats on you and has sex outside of the relationship. There's multiple answers here. You could leave the person. That is an option. But there's also the ability to sit down and talk and understand, is this a one-time thing? And what was it that led to this? Why? You can talk about these things. Of course, there's a breach of trust and faithfulness and things like this, that's going to take time to overcome, but it's possible for that to occur. So the Buddha is not telling you what you should or shouldn't do in your life. He's not giving you rules and commandments. He's teaching you how to purify your mind so that now you can maintain your calmness and composure. And now in the situation, you can come up with a wise decision that's going to work for you. So if you have an abusive partner who's physically abusing you, I assume that's what you're maybe talking about, you have some decisions to make, because there's decisions that you made that you're now in this relationship. That's the Gama, right? There's certain decisions that were made that led to this relationship occurring. But now there's certain decisions that you can make to change this situation too. And one of the answers might be to leave. That is an answer, but there's other answers here as well. And that's where you've got to be able to figure that out. And the teachings of the Buddha are going to help guide you in being able to train your mind so that now you can come to a wise decision about how to handle this situation. But what you wouldn't be interested in doing is the things that you were mentioning, like retaliating or causing harm back, because as you do that, that's just going to produce more harm for you. So the Buddha's not giving you any kind of decision tree about what to do or what not to do. He's helping you to understand your mind and how it functions, so that now if you train it, you can now navigate the world peacefully and get to the point where if you're in a relationship that has challenges, you can make some decisions about what to do next. And he's not going to tell you exactly what to do, but he does teach you what to do with your own mind so that now you can come to a conclusion or a decision that you feel comfortable with. Even me, when students come to me and ask me, should I leave this partner? I don't say yes or no. It's not my place to decide that, right? I say, well, if you stay with the partner, here's what you're going to experience. If you don't stay with them, here's what you're going to experience. And if you choose to stay with them, you're going to need to consider these types of things. And if you don't stay with them, you're going to need to consider these types of things. And then it's up to the individual to make their own decision. So what we do as teachers is we're like a tour guide. We're pointing out for you the things that you need to learn and understand. And then it's you that's making the decisions for your own life. Yeah, please.
Thank you. So in defense of therapy then, because it sounded a little bit like you said, oh, therapy can't help, but that sounds like a lot of what you just said sounded like something, I haven't really been to therapy, but like what they would actually tell you in therapy, right? It sounded to me like my impression of therapy is that they would tell me something like what you just told me, except that you also have the added benefit of the Buddha's teaching. And I would sometimes like to make the thought experiments even more exaggerated, just to make the point, right? So if it's not just someone cheating on me, or you said even a physically abusive relationship where someone's hitting me, isn't there, like, let's imagine someone approaching me on the street and actively attacking me, like a criminal or someone drunk outside of a bar. I walk on the street, they don't like my face for whatever reason, and they punch me, right? I think saying, oh, well, it's your decision. Maybe you can stand there. Maybe you can accept it. Maybe you can. I think like the reasonable answer is just, well, run away if you can, right? Like, don't just, because, but to make this even more exaggerated still, remind me if I'm wrong, but isn't there a story in all of the Buddhist stories that there are about an arahat, right? Like an enlightened being who's not a Buddha, an arahat being attacked by thugs. I assume this is 2,300 years ago, and the thugs start beating this guy up, And he basically says, well, you are not able to, like, you can kill me, but I'm not suffering, basically. And these thugs go, oh, this is odd. Like, this guy is clearly not afraid of us. So because he's fully enlightened, right? This guy. So they realize they can't really extort him or threaten him or make him do anything. But I think in the end, they do kill him. So his body dies. But the story would say, well, he didn't suffer, right? So, like, how are we supposed to understand this?
So the story that you're sharing isn't 100% accurate based on the way that you're sharing it, but that's okay. I can help you to understand what was taught there. But the Buddha's teachings aren't to just stand there and let someone beat you up and stab you with a knife and hit you in the face. That's not what he's teaching you at all. Because in order to practice these teachings, you need to have loving kindness and compassion for all beings, starting with yourself. If you don't have loving kindness and compassion for this being who you are, how could you ever have it for anyone else? And loving kindness is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. Compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others. So if somebody came and started stabbing you with a knife and you're just like, oh, that's interesting. I see what your decisions are. Well, I guess I'm going to die now. That wouldn't be loving kindness and compassion for this being who you are. So the Buddha's not giving you, again, a decision tree, but he's not telling you to just sit there and just let somebody hit you and stab you with a knife or rape you or anything like that. That's not what he's teaching. But what you're referring to is a simile where he calls it the two-handed saw, where there's these two criminals who, and it was an analogy, it was a simile, it wasn't a real life thing. And he was saying, if you were essentially kidnapped by these two criminals and they were sawing you limb by limb by limb, and if hatred arose in your mind during that period of time, he said you wouldn't be practicing my teachings, right? And the reason why is because by the time you get to enlightenment, it's not possible for you to hate. It's physically impossible for you to have hatred. Because the reason why the mind has hatred is because there's certain, what you're going to learn about is craving, desire, attachments, wants, and expectations. And if somebody meets those expectations, you like them. But if they don't meet your expectations and your wants, then you dislike them. So he was just using an analogy saying that there's no place in the mind of an enlightened being for hatred. But that doesn't mean you're just going to sit there and let them saw you to pieces. That would be unwise. And an enlightened being isn't going to make unwise decisions. If you can get away, yeah, get away, run. That would be the wise thing to do in that situation. So oftentimes people have heard little bits and smidgets and pieces of the teachings and they don't really understand it fully. So that's why I share the book so you can see exactly what he taught. And then when someone asks a question, I can help you to understand. But yeah, there's no part of these teachings that you would just be passive and just sit there and let somebody stab you to death or saw your body limb to limb to limb. But if those things were occurring, even though they wouldn't be, but even if they were, your mind, by the time you get to enlightenment, you wouldn't have any hatred in your mind whatsoever. This is something that is possible for you when you train your mind to get to that point. Right now, you probably can't even fathom that occurring, but you can get to that point where your mind is like that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think this gentleman had a question. Do you still have a question? Mm-hmm. No question? Okay. If you could turn that off while you guys aren't using it, that way we won't get feedback. Sometimes the speakers will get feedback. Okay, I don't see any questions online either. So I'm going to move to this next piece, which is helping you to understand what the teachings of the Buddha are not. This is one of my teaching methods. If you end up spending time with me to learn, you'll see that I'll teach what something is, but then I will teach what something is not also. Because this is teaching you and helping you to understand what something is by explaining what something is not. So the teachings of the Buddha are not a collection of beliefs, doctrine, concepts, opinions, and views that will produce a pleasant afterlife if you believe in them, and an unpleasant afterlife if you do not believe in them. As you guys heard me share, there's no belief in the teachings of the Buddha. He never said, just believe me. He actually said just the opposite. He said, come, examine my teachings, see for yourself. Because if you examine his teachings close enough, you'll be able to see that they're true. So his teachings aren't beliefs. His teachings aren't opinions. They're not views. It's none of those kinds of things. It's true reality, to be able to see what is true. But the thing is the wisdom of a Buddha, let's just say a wisdom of a Buddha is here, an unenlightened being, even though they're equal people, but we're just talking about their wisdom. The wisdom of an unenlightened being, let's just say, is here. That unenlightened being looking at that wisdom is going to have difficulties seeing the truth. They're going to have difficulty seeing true reality because of those pollutions that are in the mind. So that's why you're never interested in believing any of the teachings, but instead you learn them, examine them, investigate them, you reflect on them to independently verify whether they're true or false, and then you practice them to be able to see for yourself. And by the time you fully understand the teachings of the Buddha, you'll see that they're not views and opinions. It's true reality, because you can independently verify every single aspect of his teachings. And that's the way that a Buddha teaches. That's why they don't perform a whole bunch of miracles to try to convince people who they are, is because their teachings are independently verifiable. So if you peer enough into his teachings, you can independently verify them, and you'll see that they're not beliefs, doctrines, concepts, opinions, or views. And there's no belief in his teachings whatsoever. Also, I would share that the teachings of the Buddha are not a religion, even though many people talk about it as a religion. But it really comes down to how you think about what is a religion. If you think about a religion as an organization with one person at the top telling everybody else what they should or shouldn't be doing, or if you think about religion as rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, or if you think about a religion as rules and commandments that everyone must follow, in order to create a peaceful world, the teachings of the Buddha are none of those things. There isn't one person at the top of Buddhism telling everybody what they should or shouldn't be doing. There are no rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship. If you're seeing these kinds of things associated with the teachings of the Buddha, those people have grossly misunderstood his teachings. And there's plenty of misunderstandings because, as you guys heard, most people don't actually study with the original words of the Buddha. And there are no rules in commandments. Nobody would ever get to enlightenment following a bunch of rules. So if you think of religion in this way, the Buddha's teachings don't have any of these kinds of things. So we can easily see that it's not a religion. That the Buddha didn't get to enlightenment and say, I've discovered a new religion. That's not what he said. He said, I've discovered a better way of life. And he figured out how to get to this better way of life, this peace and joy in the mind. And then he dedicated the rest of his life to helping other people figure out how to do that. So his teachings, in my opinion, are not a religion. His teachings also aren't based in punishments and rewards. Sometimes, depending on how we grew up, we might have been taught that way, that there's these punishments and rewards that are meant to either fear you into doing things a certain way or incentivize you into doing things another way. So his teachings don't include that. Also, his teachings don't have anything mystical or magical or superstitious or auspicious as part of it. There's none of those things. In fact, he said it very clearly that his teachings don't include those kinds of things. Also, his teachings aren't something to attempt to force others or convince other people to do. Sometimes is what you learn when you start learning the teachings of a certain tradition. They will teach you to go out into the world and convince other people to believe those kinds of things. That's not the way the teachings of the Buddha work. The teachings of the Buddha are for you. It's for you to learn and grow and develop and become a better and better person. One of the ways we might think about these teachings is like a self-help program. It's like the best, most well-vetted self-help program that you've ever seen in your entire life, because it's been around for 2,500 years for a reason, because it works, right? So you don't need to go out into the world and convince other people to learn and practice these teachings. These teachings are for you to learn and grow and develop. And I can share with you that 6 months, a year, 2 years into this, as you're becoming more and more peaceful and more joyful, your friends and family are going to be like, what are you doing? What's happened? You used to be frustrated and angry and stressed and having anxiety. Like, what are you doing? You're going to be like, oh, well, I'm studying the teachings of the Buddha. You're going to be like, well, how can I do that? Right? They're going to start getting interested. The teachings of the Buddha slowly propagate into the world that way. As you're around people and people see that you're becoming more and more peaceful, they'll be interested, but you don't need to make an effort to go out and convince people to do things, because your peacefulness and your joy isn't contingent on other people, right? Because otherwise the Buddha would have never been able to get to enlightenment, right? Because the whole world was frustrated and angry and irritated, just like now. The whole world was the same way during his lifetime, right? But he was able to get to peace and joy because it's not contingent on what other people choose to do. Also, His teachings aren't short, catchy phrases that will produce some kind of benefit in life. If you spend any time on social media, you might see these little short, catchy phrases and people will slap the Buddha, right? And if you do the research on these quotes, about 99.99999% of the time, the Buddha didn't even say those things. Those are like modern quotes. There's actually a website that's devoted to this. It's called fakebuddhaquotes.com, right? This individual has gone out and researched a lot of these quotes, and they're basically in the last 50, 100, 200 years. The Buddha never even said any of these things. The Buddha's discourses are deep and very profound. You'll see if you start reading his teachings that he doesn't have these short little catchy phrases. Also, his teachings aren't stuck in a cultural past that degrades or denigrates any particular type of person. Sometimes people think teachings from 2,500 years ago, he must have degraded women, right? Or minorities or something like this. Nope. You'll never see that in his teachings whatsoever. He taught equality. He taught to treat all people equally. Males, he taught how to be respectful to women. He taught women how to be respectful to men. He taught everybody how to live in harmony with love and kindness. He didn't teach to degrade or denigrate anybody. He didn't teach to judge other people and look down on other people. So his teachings aren't stuck in this cultural past. In fact, he doesn't have any culture in his teachings whatsoever, because culture oftentimes has things that are unwise as part of that culture. So if you were just following a particular culture, you actually wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment, because culture is different from region to region based on the people that are in that region. What the teachings of the Buddha are doing with these natural laws is they're cutting through all of that. I've practiced these same teachings, whether I'm here in Thailand, whether I'm in the USA, or whether I'm in a Muslim country like Egypt. I've been to all these different places. I've been even to Mexico and places like this, where I treat everybody the same based on these natural laws. Where here in Thailand, it might be Sawadee Krap. When you're in Egypt, it's Assalamu Alaikum, right? Same thing. You're just being respectful and polite and kind to the people around you, right? So when you learn and practice the teachings of the Buddha, it will cut through culture and to give you the ability to now interact with all beings harmoniously, no matter what population of people they're from, what culture they're from, or what religion that they practice. You'll be able to practice in such a way that you can be at ease and treat everybody with respect and kindness and politeness. But it just takes time to be able to gradually train your mind to get to that point. But it's helpful to be able to understand that the teachings of the Buddha aren't stuck in a cultural past, that he didn't degrade and denigrate any type of people. Sometimes even people ask about individuals who have same-gender relationships, thinking that surely the Buddha must have said something about that. Well, he actually did mention it. He observed it because it was happening during his lifetime too. There's never been a time where everybody had sex with the opposite gender. Ever since the beginning of humanity, that people have been having sex with the same gender and the opposite gender, ever since the beginning of humanity. He was aware of it, but he didn't teach that there was anything harmful, because two loyal, loving, consenting adults choosing to have a relationship with each other, they're not causing any harm to anybody. So you'll see that the Buddha treated everybody equally, and he taught equality and love and kindness and compassion for all beings. So this is what the teachings of the Buddha are not. Do you guys have any questions on any of this stuff? Yes, sir. Not yet. Usually once you press the button, you see the lights, just wait like a second or two. We could call them Buddhist microphones because it helps to cultivate patience. No, if you press the button, you should see the green light or the blue lights, but then it turns off. The lights will turn off. Yeah, just press it until you see the lights, and then and then once you see the lights, then you can talk from there. There you go.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering here. I have, they're not very.
It's still on. It's
Is it still on?
It's just impermanent because of the frequency.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a short question here. I mean, I don't really want to debate the definition of religion, but I've heard, of course, in school they taught us, Buddhism is one of the world religions. And then when you start listening to Western monks, they say, no, it's a science of the mind. And then scholars of religion will say, well, of course they would say that because they want to sell it to the West, right? The best definition, and then I listen to scholars of religion to say, we don't even know. But people with PhDs, they don't even know how to define religion. And the best approximation I've heard is it has to do with praxis, how people live their daily lives. Because people have tried, it's about belief because they're based on Christianity, right? Or it's about, but what we call religion is so vast. So if it's just something that has to do with the rituals you do and it informs how you live your daily life, and we live in Thailand, and you see people just going and they're bowing to the statues, they're bringing flowers. Isn't it a religion by that definition?
So you need to understand that what you see people doing and what the Buddha taught are oftentimes two different things. So if you see someone bowing to statues, that's not what the Buddha taught. So
no, but they are Buddhists. If you ask them, they would call themselves Buddhists. Or do you mean that the normal Thai people, this country is listed as a 95% Buddhist country? Would you say that they are actually not? It becomes a true Scotsman fallacy. Oh, but they're not true Buddhists. They're not actually.
So let me finish. That way you'll understand. So what you see the Buddha teaching during his lifetime and what people do today are oftentimes two different things. So while this person might be referring to themselves as Buddhist, that's not what the Buddha actually taught. So when you're talking about what did the Buddha teach and what are we going to call Buddhism, it's the original teachings of the Buddha. And it doesn't include any of this bowing to statues, feeding statues, giving flowers to statues. All of that is the rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and prayer that the Buddha actually never taught. So while that person might consider what they're doing to be Buddhist, that's not what the Buddha would have taught. So the Buddha, during his lifetime, these same kinds of things were happening that people weren't practicing his teachings. So he gave a great analogy on this, and you'll understand, is that he said that if he was a cow and he was walking on the soft earth during rainy season and he was leaving behind hoof prints and there was a donkey behind him and this donkey was putting its hoof prints in the same prints as him, as the cow, and the donkey was thinking, I'm a cow, I'm a cow, I'm a cow. Just because the donkey is putting its hooves in the same hoof prints and it thinks that it's a cow, does that make the donkey a cow? And the answer is no, right? So just because this person is bowing to statues and praying to statues and giving flowers, does that make them practicing the teachings of the Buddha? No, they're not actually doing what the Buddha actually taught. So nowadays, you'll see people that will shave their hair, wear orange robes, or shave their hair and wear white clothes, but they're not actually practicing the teachings of the Buddha, right? We might even say that person's not a monk. Right? Sometimes you'll see news flashes that there's monks that were caught using drugs and alcohol, or they were maybe abusing kids sexually. And they'll say monks have been removed from the temple. When I see that, I don't see a monk. I see a donkey, right? I see a donkey that's shaving their hair, that's wearing orange robes or white clothes, and they're choosing to call themselves Buddhists, but they're not actually practicing the original teachings of the Buddha. So you need to be able to separate these two things. And the more you understand what the Buddha actually taught, you'll see that it's not a religion. But what you've probably been exposed to is what you're seeing as a religion, because there's rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, prayer, these kinds of things.
Language. I actually agree with you totally.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you because you talked over me again.
No, I'm actually agreeing with you. That's what I want to say.
Oh, okay.
I agree with you totally.
Yeah. And just so you know, when you're learning with me, because you mentioned about you don't want to debate something, I'm not here to debate anybody about anything. I'm not here to argue anything. I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. I know the teachings of the Buddha, and I can help you experience this enlightened mental state, but an individual needs to decide that that's what they're interested in. And then they ask questions to be able to learn and understand. It's not about me trying to convince you that what I think about these teachings is true or false. But if you're interested in experiencing this enlightened mental state, I will show you how to experience that. And it would mean that you would need to be interested in experiencing that. And then you ask questions to be able to understand how to do that. And then when we have a exchange where you're understanding through asking questions, that's where you can cultivate wisdom and experience improvement in the way that you function in the world through the mind getting rid of its pollutions.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree with you. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And let me just share this, because you're not the only person that's ever said those kinds of things. It's not about whether you agree with me or disagree with me. That's not even something that I am trying to advocate for or trying to convince somebody, because if you study with me long enough, there's going to be things that you disagree with, right? You're going to disagree with certain things that I share. And whenever there's disagreement, that's actually a wonderful time for growth and improvement. Because if you're in a classroom where you agree with everything that somebody shares, you're in the wrong classroom, because you're not growing and improving. Because right now, you know that you get angry, you know you get frustrated or agitated or annoyed or any of those other discontent feelings. And in order to be able to get to the peace and joy that is enlightenment, you're going to need to break through some of your false beliefs, your false opinions, your false views. There's certain things in your mind that you don't understand 100%. That's why the mind has that lack of wisdom, or that unknowing of true reality, or that confusion. So an individual who's unenlightened, if they're studying with someone who has wisdom of what enlightenment is, or maybe even they're enlightened themselves, if there's someone who's studying who's unenlightened, they're going to disagree with that person, because they don't have the same wisdom. So if you study with me long enough, you'll disagree about certain things that you hear, but that's an opportunity for you to ask questions and gain clarity and ask for more information, because that way then you can see more and more clearly of what is true reality. But there's going to be situations where you disagree with a teacher, but it's not about everybody agreeing. And disagreement doesn't mean disrespect. It just means that there's been exposure to different understanding of the world. And now if there's disagreement, let's be sure you ask the questions that you need to be able to understand. And even still at that point, there still might not be agreement, and that's okay. That's just impermanence. But disagreement doesn't mean disrespect. And disagreement is an opportunity to learn and grow and develop and be able to understand more. And then that's what's going to help you to be able to gain more wisdom and awaken to enlightenment.
Thank you. And I'm trying to keep my answers short, and that's why to allow you to speak longer. I, of course, didn't say that. I mean, I'm going to say it again. I agree with what you just said, that I will probably disagree with you, and that's good. What I meant exactly is that I agreed with the specific thing that you just said. Not that I assume that I will agree with everything for all eternity with you. Of course not. I agree. It's a funny how language works. It's a language thing. I agree with you that I will probably disagree with you. You see what I mean?
Yes.
Yes.
I understand. I just was interested in using that as an opportunity to be able to teach, because there's lots of people who's learning here, and then there's people online as well. And sometimes people, when they go into a learning experience, they might think for themselves that it's about agreeing or disagreeing with a teacher. And that's not what you're interested in. That's not what's going to produce wisdom for you. Because if you're in a classroom where you're actually learning how to get to enlightenment, there's going to be things that you disagree with. Absolutely. And you would be interested in that, because that's what's going to help you break through that lack of wisdom to be able to get to something that you understand. And disagreement is wonderful. It's an opportunity for you to ask questions and understand. So as I teach, I'm sure there's going to be things you agree with, and I'm sure there's going to be things that you disagree with. But if you just ask questions, then you'll be able to understand. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
As novices and as tourists that we are here, we've been going in and out of temples, and like you say, looking at the beautiful iconography and trying to understand from our frame of reference the practices. And so I really appreciate you bringing up all that we're seeing, because it is a little bit confusing.
Yeah.
How would you suggest that we experience the temples as we continue to wander around?
Yeah. So on Friday, I'm going to be leading a temple tour. If you guys are interested, I have a class coming up this week, Monday through Friday, or a course Monday through Friday. It's called Foundation in the Path to Enlightenment. It's 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday. And you can come to the entire course if you'd like, or you can come to bits and pieces of it, or you can just come to Friday, where I take students out to the temples and I teach you the symbolism, the artwork, and the architecture of the temples. Because if you understand that, the temples really speak to you. They really come to life. Because without that understanding, it's just like, oh, that's pretty. I'll take a picture of that. Or, oh, that's interesting. Let me take a picture of that. But once you understand the meaning behind these things, you'll actually be able to visit these temples with more meaning. And it'll actually almost, the temple walls will speak to you at that point. So if you'd like to go on that tour on Friday, we're going to meet here at 9:00. And whether you come all week long or not, people are more than welcome to come. We're going to meet here at 9:00, and then we come back at around 5 p.m. usually. So it's a whole day thing, and we visit 2 different temples, and we have lunch at a Hill Tribe restaurant up on the mountain. So it's a great day to spend time with other people and get out. It's kind of like a classroom without walls. So that's the best way to actually learn how to visit a temple, because most of these temples, I'll just share this with you briefly, is what a temple is it's like the womb of a woman. The womb of a woman is the very best place to become a human being, right? Without the womb of a woman, none of us would be here. So the temple environment is like the womb of a woman, that it's the very best place to grow and develop into a better and better human being. And for ordained practitioners, they live in that womb all day long, right? That's where their home is. But for us household practitioners, we enter in and exit out of that womb on a daily basis. So it's a learning center. It's a place to learn and grow and cultivate wisdom to be able to become a better and better human being. And if you understand what the temple is for, then you can actually benefit from that. Another way to think about it is like a modern mental health network, right? Where the Thai people over multiple generations have created this mental health network all over the country, where you can go in and find somebody like me that's going to help you to be able to learn and grow and develop and help train your mind. You can improve your personal and professional relationships, but it's all being done with no expectation of anything in return. Where oftentimes in our home countries, if we were to ask for this kind of help, we'd have to spend $150, $200, $300 an hour to spend time with somebody to be able to learn these kinds of things. We're in a temple environment, because it's being created based in generosity, that you can enter in and exit out of that without any expectation of anything in return. So it's a learning center. It's a place to learn and grow and develop into becoming a better and better human being. And that's one of the beauties about Thailand and the way it's been created with all these temples. But you're going to need help to be able to go around and understand more about the temple and why things are set up the way that they are and so forth. Because in those environments, when I take people out on these tours, we end up spending a lot of time talking about what the teachings of the Buddha are not. Because you're going to see a lot of things in these temples that aren't the teachings of the Buddha. If you're seeing people sprinkle water and tie strings on their wrists, beads like that and stuff like that, none of that is based in the teachings of the Buddha. But you're going to see a lot of that stuff, and that can lead you to think that that is the teachings of the Buddha. So it's helpful to go with a dedicated practitioner and teacher that can help you to be able to understand the teachings, and then you can see for yourself. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. You guys have a lot of questions. It's great. Yeah.
With regards to the rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, how has that came to be within what we call Buddhism, I guess?
Yeah. So if you guys would like to continue, what I'll do is I'll explain the answer to this question. Normally I take a break, but just because you have lots of questions, which is completely fine with me, you guys can ask all the questions that you like. I'm going to keep teaching, but if you guys would like to take a break, like use the bathroom or get a glass of water, help yourself, because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to teach you the Four Noble Truths, and I'm going to answer your question for you so that you understand how this all came about, right? The very teachings of the Buddha that explains the natural laws can help you to understand why we are where we are with the teachings of the Buddha, is that it's because of the universal truth of impermanence. This universal truth of impermanence is helping you to be able to see that things are constantly changing in the world around you. So 2,500 years ago, when you have an individual who's taught like the Buddha, and now 2,500 years later, things have changed. People have changed his teachings. And he warned people that it would be unwise to do that it would be unwise to change his teachings. But because not everybody studied with his original words, then we see lots of changes that people have done. And they just don't understand that this isn't the original teachings of the Buddha. And the Buddha actually taught during his lifetime that this is exactly where we would be at this point in time. He talked about this low point in his teachings. He talked about these 500-year cycles that would occur from the time of his death. And he talked about this low period where very few people would understand his teachings at this point. So because of impermanence and constant change, this is why we see what we see, that people have integrated rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, prayer into his teachings when it has nothing to do with his teachings at all. Yep. Yeah, monks too. Like the average monk doesn't study the original teachings of the Buddha. Yeah. It's kind of challenging. I imagine you grew up in a Christian environment. Yeah. So like the Bible, it's like this big and it's got 66 books within one book. We can't imagine someone being Christian without studying the Bible, right? But when you've got 45 books that are this thick, you can't have access to those wide throughout the entire world. So the vast majority of people don't study with his original words. Yep. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So if you do study with his original teachings, though, you'll see that they actually work, that they're actually true. But that's what you got to get to is the original words. And that's why I make them available at no cost. So let me just check in with you guys because I kind of made that decision on my own to just keep on going in the class. Are you guys okay if I keep going and you guys stretch your legs, or would you like to have a little break? I'm seeing some thumbs up, but of course, all of you guys probably aren't going to vote the same, right? Because that would be permanence. But let me just see a show of hands. How many people of you guys are okay if I just keep teaching? Oh, okay. Well, that's the majority of you. Okay. So I'll just keep teaching. Feel free to move around, stretch, whatever you'd like to do. Turn on the air conditioning, get some water, make yourself at home, right? It's this temple doesn't belong to me, but yet it belongs to all of us, right? So just make yourself at home. Okay. So I'll just keep going then. So I'm going to teach you guys this because it takes me about 45 minutes to teach this. And we got about an hour left, and that gives you guys some time for questions too, is that the very first teaching of the Buddha is called the Four Noble Truths. In 4 simple statements, you're going to be able to understand the problem in your mind, the cause of the problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. And I'm going to help you to do this in a way that you can independently verify, that you don't believe anything that I'm sharing. Don't ever believe anything that I'm sharing, right? In the books, in the classes, or anything. So I'll show you guys how this works. So the very first teaching of the Buddha is called the Four Noble Truths. This is part of what's referred to as the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is the core central teaching of the Buddha that everything else plugs into. The Four Noble Truths is part of what's called right view. It's the very first step on the Eightfold Path. It forms a foundation that everything else is built upon. If you didn't understand the Four Noble Truths, you would have no ability to understand anything that the Buddha taught about any topic whatsoever. So that's why we start with the Four Noble Truths. Even the Buddha did the same thing during his life. He would start all of his brand new students with the Four Noble Truths. So I'm going to walk you guys through this in a way that helps you to independently verify it, so you can have a breakthrough to understanding why your mind experiences all these discontent feelings, and then you can understand the solution of how to fix it as well. So as we go, I'm going to pause a few times so you guys can ask questions. In order to teach you the Four Noble Truths, I need to first teach you the 3 Universal Truths. These are building blocks that are going to help you to understand the Four Noble Truths. The first one is called the universal truth of impermanence. This is where you learn that things are constantly changing in the world around you, that there's something called conditioned objects that arise, change, and fade away. This is called impermanence. Anything you can see, hear, smell, taste, anything that comes in contact with the body, or any thoughts or ideas that go through the mind, this is all impermanent, meaning it's constantly changing. Okay? This is called conditioned objects. Then there's something called unconditioned objects. They don't arise, they don't change, and they don't fade away. The natural laws of existence and enlightenment are the 2 things that are unconditioned objects. They don't arise, change, or fade away. So everything else in the world around you, that's why I say everything in the world is constantly changing, meaning everything in this material world, anything you can see, hear, smell, taste, anything that comes in contact with the body, or any thoughts or ideas that go through the mind, this is all impermanent. Okay, so this is the intellectual learning of this universal truth. But now you don't believe that. You're not interested in believing this. Because remember, what the Buddha is doing is he's teaching you how the world is. He's not teaching you how the world should be. He's teaching you how the world is. So now that you've heard this intellectually, now you need to reflect on it to verify whether it's true or whether it's false. Okay? The way you do this is you start looking around the world and you try to find something that is permanent. If you can find something that's permanent, then you've disproven this and it's not a universal truth. So I suggest you start with something that you're familiar with, maybe like this physical body. Ask yourself, is this body permanent, meaning it's been exactly the same throughout your entire life, or is this body impermanent, meaning it's constantly changing? So what would you say? Is this body permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, right? It's been constantly changing. Ever since the egg and the sperm came together, it's been constantly changing. You get taller. Sometimes we get shorter. We get fatter, right? We get skinnier. We grow teeth, and then the teeth fall out, and then new ones come in. We get pimples and moles and wrinkles. We get gray hair. We kind of lose our hair, right? This is all change in the physical body. What about your relationships? If your relationships are permanent, you have exactly the same people in your life your entire life. If your relationships are impermanent, then you've had people coming and going in and out of your life your entire life. So what would you say? Are your relationships permanent or impermanent? Which one? They're impermanent, right? You have people coming and going in and out of your life all the time. What about your bank account? Is your bank account permanent or impermanent? You guys are quiet now. Is your bank account permanent, meaning it's exactly the same level all the time, or is it constantly changing? It's impermanent, right? Some bank accounts go up and down. Some people's go up, up, up. Some go down, down, down. This is constant change. What about the weather? Is the weather permanent or impermanent? It's impermanent, right? It's constantly changing, right? So we could go on and on and on and on. And this is what you're going to need to be able to do to be able to independently verify this for yourself. Look around the temple. You see wood planks on the floor. Some of them are longer, some of them are shorter. Some of them are one color, some of them are another color. That's impermanence. Right? Some of you guys were sitting in a certain place and now you've gotten up and you're standing. That's impermanence. Things are constantly changing. There's green leaves in the tree and there's brown leaves on the ground. That's impermanence. You're walking down the sidewalk. You see a crack in the sidewalk. That's impermanence. Here in Thailand, the sidewalks actually go up and down, right? You're walking and you have to walk up the sidewalk and down the sidewalk, right? Some streets have sidewalks, some streets don't. This is all impermanence, okay? This is a fundamental building block that's going to help you to understand the Four Noble Truths when we get to it. Now there's the second universal truth. This is helping you to understand the unenlightened mind. And depending on where you've studied or if you've studied, you might have heard some people refer to this as suffering. I don't explain it that way, and I'll explain to you why, but let me first explain to you what this universal truth is and what the Buddha taught. In the original teachings, in the Pali language, the word that's being used is dukkha. This translates to discontent, discontented, or discontentedness. What the Buddha is describing here is how the unenlightened mind experiences three feelings, and these are called conditioned feelings: pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. The pleasant feelings are things like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. Very pleasurable to experience those. Then there's painful feelings like sadness, anger, frustration, agitation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, things like this. It's very painful to experience those. Then there's neither painful nor pleasant. I put boredom and loneliness here, but you could say for some people, they say that that's painful for them. Okay, put that in the painful category if you like. But shyness is a good example, right? It's not painful. It's not pleasant. It's neither painful nor pleasant. Or let's just say somebody you don't know came and sat really close to you on public transportation. You might say, maybe your body's touching their body. It's like, it's not painful. It's not pleasant. Maybe your mind's uncomfortable. That's what neither painful nor pleasant is. Okay, so the Buddha is describing here the unenlightened mind, that based on some condition, you're going to experience pleasure, pain, or neither pain nor pleasure. So a simple example of that is if you wake up in the morning and you see it's sunny outside and you get really happy and excited, that's a conditioned feeling. Based on the condition of the sun, you're now going to experience happiness in the mind. That's conditional. It arises, it changes, and it fades away. Because now when it rains, you're frustrated. Or if you get really happy when your bank account balance is up here, that's conditional. Because now when your bank account balance goes here, you're sad or frustrated or agitated or annoyed. These are conditioned feelings. Okay, this is what the unenlightened mind experiences. Conditioned feelings. Based on some condition, there's going to be pleasant, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant feelings in the mind. So remember, you don't believe this. You need to independently verify it because this is a universal truth. And you know that your mind is unenlightened, so you would be able to independently verify this because you can ask yourself, is this what you experience? Is there any feeling that you experience that doesn't fit into one of these three categories? And if there is, when we get to the question period, just let me know and I'll help you to be able to see that. So here he's describing the unenlightened mind as experiencing these three feelings. Now, some people refer to this as suffering. I don't use that word. I use the word discontent, discontented, or discontentedness. Because what the Buddha is describing here is the shaking up of the mind, the unsteadiness, the instability of the mind. Because if your boss came in and gave you a raise and said, hey, you're doing a great job, you're going to get $20,000 a year more per year in your salary, and you got really excited about that, you probably wouldn't say you were suffering, right? Or say your mom calls you up and says, hey, I heard you had a new house. I'm going to come visit you this weekend. We'll make that favorite food that you like. And you get really excited that mom's coming to see you. You probably wouldn't say you were suffering. Or if that person you didn't know came and sat close to you on public transportation and your body was touching their body, you probably wouldn't say you were suffering in that situation. So the word suffering explains the painful feelings really well. Because when you're angry or frustrated or stressed or anxiety, you might say you're suffering in that situation. But when you're experiencing pleasant feelings or neither painful nor pleasant, you probably wouldn't say you were suffering. So if we use this word suffering, it doesn't bring your understanding to the full spectrum of emotions and feelings that the Buddha is talking about with this universal truth. So that means you'd only be understanding 33% of his teachings, and you're missing 66% of his teachings. So if you kept using this word suffering, you'd be missing 66% of his teachings. And if you're missing 66% of a teacher's teachings, how could you ever get to the goal? How could you ever get to the outcome of enlightenment? So I don't use that word because it doesn't accurately describe the full understanding that the Buddha is helping you to be able to understand. You need to be able to understand that the conditioned pleasant feelings are just as much a part of the problem as the painful ones. Because if you allow your mind to get a conditioned pleasant feeling, the painful feelings are waiting for you right around the corner. So if you get really excited that you got a brand new job, well, 5 years later, when the company goes out of business, or you get laid off, or you get fired, you're going to be angry and frustrated. So what the Buddha is teaching you how to do is to get beyond conditional feelings, where you're no longer experiencing conditional pleasure. Because conditional pleasure, you can only have pleasure when these conditions are met. If my mom and dad does this, if my boss does this, if the weather is this, if my bank account is this, if I have this kind of house, this kind of car, then I'll be happy. So that means your happiness shrinks because it's conditional. And all those things being true is very unlikely. So what the Buddha is teaching you to do is how to get beyond that, where you can get to unconditional happiness or unconditioned joy where your mind can just always be happy. There doesn't need to be any condition met in order for you to experience that. But as long as you allow your mind to get conditional happiness, which is temporary happiness, as long as you keep allowing the mind to do that, you'll never get to the permanent happiness or the permanent joy. So you need to be able to see the conditioned pleasant feelings as just as much a part of the problem as the painful ones, because the mind is shaken up in that situation. Have you ever been so excited that you like tripped and fell, or you dropped something and broke it? Have you ever experienced that? Yeah, you have? I remember when I was 11 years old, I had a bird in a cage, and I was taking it to my grandmother's house, and I came out of the house, and we lived in this house that had stairs that went down, and I came out to the top of the stairs, and I was like, look, everybody, look at my bird. This is my bird. My bird's name was Fred. It was a little parakeet. I was like, look at my bird. This is Fred. I'm going to my grandma's house. And then I was so excited, and I tripped and fell, and the cage popped open, the bird flew away, and then, of course, I was sad. Right? Because I wasn't getting what I wanted, which was this bird, right? So if you allow your mind to get the happiness, the conditional happiness, it's temporary. The painful feelings are waiting for you right around the corner. But you can get beyond this where the mind is experiencing unconditional happiness. So that's why it's important to use the word discontent, discontented, or discontentedness, because you can see the full spectrum of feelings and emotions that the Buddha is talking about. And if you didn't be able to understand that, if you weren't able to understand that, you wouldn't be able to understand the full problem that he's talking about. So this is the second universal truth. He's explaining the unenlightened mind. I'm going to teach one more, and then I'm going to open up the questions. So then there's the universal truth of non-self. This is the third universal truth. This is actually a solution to one of the problems that the Buddha discovered in the mind. So let me first explain to you the problem, and then I'll explain to you the solution. So out of those 10 fetters that the Buddha discovered, those are the 10 pollutions. The first one is called personal existence view. This universal truth of non-self is the solution to that. What personal existence view is, this problem in the mind, this pollution, is that the mind's going to cling to your body in the mind, thinking that this is who you are as a person. You're going to cling to your self-image or your self-identity, thinking that this is who you are, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And if you're perceived that way, you'll be happy about that. But if you're not being perceived the way you want to be perceived, your mind will have painful feelings. So for example, if you've ever been in a social situation and you spilled something on your clothing and you were embarrassed by that, that's your personal existence view. You're clinging to this body, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And as long as your clothes are clean, you're happy about that and you feel great. But when you have this spaghetti sauce or chocolate ice cream on your clothing, you're not being perceived the way you want to be perceived, and now you experience the painful feeling of embarrassment. Or if you've ever been in front of the mirror and you saw a wrinkle or a mole or a pimple or a gray hair, or you started losing your hair and you were shaken up by that, that's your personal existence view, clinging to this body, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And you can only be happy if that's occurring. Or if you've ever stood in front of your closet and you thought about, who am I going to see today? And what do I want to wear? And how do I want to look? And maybe you put on some clothes and you looked in the mirror and you're like, no, that's not it. And you put on some other clothes, you're like, no, that's not it. And you put on the third, okay, now I feel comfortable to go outside. This is your personal existence view, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. Or if you were like me when I was a kid, I used to get out the gel and the mousse and I used to run it through my hair. I was going to school, right? I was running through my hair, trying to get every little hair in the right spot. And I would do this for so long, sometimes I would miss the school bus, right? I couldn't go outside until I got every little hair in exactly the right spot, right? So this is personal existence view, clinging to this body, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way, and only feeling comfortable to go outside when you feel that that's the case. But then there's another part to this. It's called self-identity, where the mind can cling to an identity of who you think you are as a person based on your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, your job or occupation. You can cling to any number of things like, I am American, or I am Irish, or I am a Brit, or I am an Aussie, or I am Mexican, or I am Lithuanian. Any of this I am about your culture, ethnicity, sexual orientation, nationality, job, or occupation. Your mind can cling to any of this as who you think you are as a person. So now let's just say you're in a relationship and you cling to the idea of I am a boyfriend, or I am a girlfriend. I am a husband, I am a wife. As long as you're in that relationship, you have a certain level of comfort. But then when you guys break up, you might be uncomfortable with that because now you're single and your mind doesn't identify that way. And you might have felt like you wanted to hurry up and get right back into another relationship again because the mind felt like that was the way to solve the problem, is to hurry up and get back into another relationship. Or say you're at a restaurant and 2 tables over, they're talking about your nationality. They might say, all Americans are lovely, kind, warm, and gentle. I've never heard this before, but maybe they would say this, right? So maybe like 2 tables over, they might be talking all this great stuff about Americans, right? And now you're like, I'm American. They're talking about me. You feel really great. You feel really wonderful, right? But now 2 tables over, they're saying something degrading or disparaging, right? And now you're frustrated and angry because they're talking about me, right? So maybe you have a job or an occupation and you think, I am a police officer, right? I am a police officer. And now when you're doing this job, you feel great. But then 10 years, 15 years into this job, maybe you get injured. You can't do it anymore. Maybe you retire. Maybe you get fired. Now you're driving a taxi and your mind's thinking, I am a police officer. And now you're disgruntled and frustrated about this, right? Because your identity in your mind is being clung to where you think this is who you are as a person. And the mind is clinging to it, wanting it to be permanent, when in reality, it's not permanent. So your mind can cling to any number of things of who you think you are as a person. It can cling to this self-image, this body, wanting it to be permanent, or clinging to the mind, the self-identity, wanting that to be permanent and wanting to be viewed by others in a certain way. And you can only feel comfortable when you're being viewed that way. So some people get to the point where they say to their family, they might say, I don't even know who I am anymore. I need to go find myself. I need to go find my true self. Sometimes people do that. They come here to Thailand. Maybe some of you have done that. I want to go find myself. I'm going to go to Thailand and find my true self. You're not going to find yourself in Thailand. That's what the Buddha is teaching you. This universal truth of non-self is he says the self does not exist, that there is no self. There is no you. This body doesn't define who you are as a person. And this identity that the mind's holding on to, that doesn't define who you are either. So there is no self. So you might come to a place like Thailand and you find a new job, new friends, new hobbies, new activities. And someone might go back to their home country and they say, hey, family, I found myself. I know who I am again. I feel so great. I know who I am. I found my true self in Thailand. No, they haven't. They're basically found new hobbies, activities, friends, job, or occupation, because as soon as all that stuff changes, they're going to be right back into the same problem, that they don't know who they are anymore. So if you cling to a self-image or this body, or you cling to this self-identity, thinking that any of this is who you are, well, when all that changes, you'll feel lost and confused. You'll feel like less of a person. So the Buddha teaches you that there is no self, that this body is not you, and this mind is not you. There is a body and there is a mind, and it's come together for this existence, but it doesn't determine who you are as a person. The person is the combination of the body and the mind, but the body by itself, the mind by itself, or even the combination of the two doesn't define who you are as a person. But because the mind's confusion, because of its lack of wisdom, its unknowing of true reality, it will cling to this stuff, thinking that this is who you are. So now when somebody says, wow, you're so handsome, or you're so beautiful, that shirt really brings out the colors of your eyes, You're like, wow, they're talking about me. Wow. But then when someone's like, my goodness, what did you do to your hair? Did you get a haircut? What happened? Now you're frustrated or angry or irritated, right? That's what's going to happen when there's personal existence view in the mind. But you can get to a point where you realize non-self, that you realize that this body is not you and this mind is not you. But the challenge is that every single one of us have been brought up where we've adopted this idea of who we think we are as a person. In fact, when we were growing up, we were all given labels. I don't know your label, but my label was David, right? Each one of us were given a name, and now we have certain personality, certain character. And then we might have been taught that you are an American, or you are a Brit, or you are Irish. And now when you see your sports teams or your national anthem or your flag, we cheer. Yay, that's me. That's who I am. Yay, I'm going to cheer for that team, right? So our mind has been conditioned to think that this is who we are. So it's a matter of training your mind to understand that this body was born on a land that is referred to as America, but the mind doesn't have to adopt the identity of I am American. Or I can do this activity of sharing the teachings of the Buddha with you, and I can understand that that's my role, but I don't have to identify with I am a Buddhist teacher. Because even if I do this for the rest of my life, someday I'm not going to be a Buddhist teacher any longer, right? So if everybody says, wow, Buddhist teachers are so kind and friendly and generous, they help people get to enlightenment, wow, you'll feel pleasant feelings. But if people say something degrading or disparaging, you'll get angry or frustrated or irritated. So this universal truth of non-self is helping you to not cling to any of this as who you are as a person or who you think you are as a person. So now let me help you to see how to independently verify this. And by the way, some people understand what I just shared with you when they first hear it. Other times people don't. Sometimes it takes people 6 months to a year to be able to revisit this multiple times and understand it. So if that's the situation that you're in, no worries, you'll be just fine. But just understand that this is something that's a little bit deeper for people to understand because you've spent so much time accumulating this personal existence view in the mind. So let me help you to see how to identify and verify that there is no self here, okay? Think about yourself when you were a child, teenager, early adulthood, and now. Think about your personality and your character. Has it been exactly the same through all those 4 phases of your life, or has it been constantly changing? What would you say? It's been changing, right? You haven't viewed yourself in the same way because there is no permanent self. Here's another way. If your arm was amputated and you only have one hand and one arm, are you less of a person? You only have one hand and one arm. Are you less of a person? Says no, no, no. Okay, so here you can see that intellectually you understand that this body is not you. Because otherwise you would have answered that question differently. Because if there's less body and this body is you, that means if your arm is amputated, you're less of a person. But you're not. You just have less body. You just have less use of a hand and an arm. You just have one hand and one arm. This is the confusion that the mind has. That intellectually, you can understand that this body is not you. But in the heat of the moment, when somebody says something agreeable or disagreeable to you, your mind's going to form feelings based on that, either pleasant or painful. Here's another way. I tend to ask students this question. Point to yourself. Where are you? Okay, that's a common place. Yep, that's a common place. Yep, that's where people usually point, either here or here. Okay, so let's look at what we're pointing to. If this is me, if this is who you are, what are you pointing to? Literally, you're pointing to a shirt. Is that who you are? That shirt that you have on? If we took off our shirt and we held it up and pointed to it, is that who you are, the shirt? That's not you, right? Okay, so let's throw it away. Where are you? And someone might point again. Well, what are you pointing to? You're pointing to skin. Is that who you are? That skin that you've got? If we were able to rip off that skin and hold it up and point to it, is that who you are? That skin that you've got? That's not you either, right? So let's throw that away. Where are you? And someone might point again. You've got ribs, you've got muscle tissue, you've got organs and fluid. None of those bits and pieces and parts are you, but the mind's going to cling to it, thinking that that is who you are. And now it's craving for that to be permanent. And that's why when you look in the mirror and you see a wrinkle, the mind doesn't like that, because it's craving permanence while you're living in an impermanent world. And you'll see this more clearly when we talk about the Four Noble Truths. So I'm just going to pause here first to see if you have any questions on the three universal truths, because these are building blocks to help you understand the Four Noble Truths. Yes, sir. Ma'am, do you still have your question? You had a question too, right?
My question's more it's a more kind of it's a bit theoretical, I guess, but it is in like a kind of poetic, romantic sense. Even things like jealousy or all the negative feelings there'll be situations where it's not we go out of our way to find these feelings, but it's part of just life, or so in some ways just being like, yeah, like maybe the good example is just romantically being foolish in romance or something, and it can be a bit, it's somehow it's part of life, or there's some beauty in it. It's not it shouldn't be taken to an extreme, and it would be deadly taken to an extreme, these kind of feelings. But yeah, is there a right amount of, is sometimes there might just be a right time to feel like sadness and anger.
So as long as you resign yourself to think that sadness and anger and all these other feelings are normal, and that you're just going to kind of almost relegate yourself to continuing to experience them, you'll continue to experience them. And now when your mind's shaken up with those feelings, you won't be able to make wise decisions. And when you make an unwise decision, you'll experience unwholesome results coming back to you. And you'll just keep experiencing unwholesomeness. So in order to get to the peace and joy, you're going to need to be able to see that these feelings aren't helpful, that they're not beneficial, that you don't have to relegate yourself to continue to experience these feelings over and over. You can get to the point where the mind's always peaceful and always joyful. And then in that state, you can make wise decisions that allows you to then experience wholesome results, where you're no longer walking down the beach and kicking up sand. It's no longer blowing in your face. Instead, you can just walk down the beach and enjoy the view, and you can enjoy the fresh air, and you can enjoy the smell, and you can enjoy the kids playing in the water, and you can enjoy everything else that's on the beach, right? But if you are disgruntled and angry and frustrated and walking through the world, and the world's out to get me and all these other things, that's no way to live a wonderful, peaceful life. So there is this better way of life that people don't always understand and they don't always see. But the human condition that one experiences in the unenlightened state, it can almost feel like, well, this is normal, and I'm just going to stay with it. I'm just going to continue to be angry and frustrated or irritated or annoyed. And someone can choose to do that if that's what they would like to do. But I would say that that's not a good way to live life. There's this better way of life that you can actually live, where the mind can be peaceful and joyful all the time. Could you get the mic so that people online can hear you?
If it was the loss of a loved one or something, and then there's a mourning period, and yeah, I mean, we normalize it, I guess, but in some way, you know, feeling loss and sadness when you lose someone, it life goes on, and you can't take it too far. But there is as a kind of way of, you know, that you know, like of signifying what that person meant to you. You kind of feel sad because it's I mean, you don't have to, but it's in some way. I mean, I think the Dalai Lama cried or something when his mother died. I know that sadness is sometimes is a right time to feel it. I don't know. I'd still say that, but
Okay, so what you're describing is the unenlightened mind, and what I'm explaining to you is that there's a better way to live life. And while right now you might think that when someone dies, you're thinking of it as a loss, and you might be grieving because of it. What I'm sharing with you is there's a better way of life. You can actually experience the death of someone close to you and not grieve and not be sorrowful. People think that the reason why they're experiencing the grief and sorrow is because of love, but that's not actually what's causing it. What's causing it is something I'm about to teach you here in a moment. So you can experience the loss of your mother, your grandmother, your grandfather, your father, all these different people. And instead of looking at it as a loss, you can look at it as a gain. That you had this wonderful person in your life, and you appreciate and have respect and gratitude that you had this person in your life. And now you can be cheerful despite the fact that they died. Because the only thing that's happened is change. That's all that's happened, is because they were born, they had to die. That's it. But when the mind's craving permanence, which you're going to see here in a moment, it's not going to be able to maintain its peace and joy during that situation. And the Dalai Lama, he's said in an interview that he's not enlightened, right? So that's what you saw. If you saw him crying, that's because if he was crying because of the loss of a family member and he was experiencing sorrow and grief, that's because he's unenlightened, right? Someone who's enlightened wouldn't experience grief and sorrow when someone close to them has died. And it's not because they didn't love the person or care about the person. They had that. It's just that they understood that this person is not permanent in their life and they're not craving permanence. So right now, while you're really used to sadness and sorrow, there is a better way of life for you out here that you can experience where you don't look at it as a loss when someone dies. You just understand that it's a normal part of life. Now, I wouldn't make light of someone's death, but you don't get sad and sorrowful when the wind blows, right? The wind is just impermanence. Sometimes it's going to be windy, sometimes it's not. Sometimes this person's going to be alive, sometimes they're going to die, right? Every single one of us is going to die. But when the mind craves permanence, it will have a difficult time with that death. But when you train your mind to not crave permanence, you can experience life where this person dies and you understand, right? And now when this person has died, you don't feel like someone's cut you off at the knees or pulled the carpet out from under your feet. You can maintain your appreciation and gratitude that you had this person in your life, and you don't view it as a loss, you view it as a gain, that this person was part of your life. And this is part of the evolution and the training that you can experience as you get closer and closer to enlightenment. So this is where you need to be able to make sure you see someone like the Dalai Lama or Thich Nhat Hanh or some of these other people. You might be looking at them and thinking that that's Buddhism, but they're not necessarily enlightened, and they're not necessarily teaching what enlightenment is or what enlightenment is not. And what I'm describing is not what you're describing, which is someone grieving during a death. Mm-hmm. You have a question? I think she's... You good?
Hello?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so once you went through those 3 discontentedness states, I started thinking about what is typically, I think, associated with Buddhism, attachment and detachment. And then you started talking about the self and non-self. So I think, elaborated with living in a state where I was addicted to attachment and feeling that I would be suffering constantly with these different forms of attachments to people, things, statuses, etc. And then trying to move towards a more detached way of living, just as, let's say, an instrument to relieve myself out of constant suffering and out of the ups and downs of life. And found as a result that that also kind of translated into being much more alone, and kind of feeling okay with losses of, people, decreased social life, losing, dear ones, and not really feeling the need to grieve that, because I was telling myself that there is no such thing as a loss. I am one with all. And I was actually thinking and feeling what you just said, that, I'm happy that that person was in my life and so on. My question to you, and then of course, new things arose in my life to which I developed new forms of attachment and so on and so forth. But if we, as humans, would kind of end up in a state where kind of nothing really, rises any new emotions in us. Everything is just okay. In the of course, as you would call it, in a non-enlightened state, that kind of feels as if our humanness is kind of dissipates a bit, because it's almost as if, if you're a human, you're supposed to feel different things and so on. And isn't it also what's sometimes called as nihilism, where you kind of okay with, you don't really care about much and everything goes. And I don't know, I kind of feel that I am struggling a little bit with that. Just,
Okay. So let me help you, because it's clear that you're not understanding what enlightenment is 100%. And this is normal when somebody's first getting started, that they have certain misunderstandings. So getting to enlightenment isn't to say you're numb or you're feeling mundane, right? That's not what enlightenment is. Oftentimes when people don't understand the full path and they don't have the guidance that they need, as they're starting to do what you described of detaching, their mind will swing all the way to the other side, where they feel dull and lethargic or mundane or bored or lonely. But that's not what enlightenment is. That's the whole two extremes. The Buddha is teaching you this middle way, right? So those emotions that you talk about, or that we're talking about actually, is like anger and frustration and bitterness and hostility. That's not human. That's animalistic, right? Because an animal, when an animal doesn't like something, it's going to growl and roar and now try to fear this other animal into doing things your way. And that's what the unenlightened human mind does. It functions very much like an animal, but we're not animals. We're actually human beings, right? And what the path to enlightenment is to become a better and better human being. And there's this mental state of enlightenment that you can experience more and more of those qualities, where you can see that you don't need to walk around with the anger and sadness and frustration, because that's just getting in your way of being able to have harmonious relationships with all the people around you. So those emotions that people tend to hold on to and think that somehow that's making them feel human, that's actually the animalistic aspect of the unenlightened human mind. This enlightened mind is actually becoming more and more human, because now you can function harmoniously with all beings around you. Sir, you have a question?
Yeah. The question is, does grace play a part in the transition from the unenlightened mind to the enlightened mind? Or is it just pure intellectual rigor and insight?
There's an intellectual component to the path to enlightenment. But if somebody just understood intellectually, they wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment. So when we talk about the cultivation of wisdom, it's beyond intellectual learning. It's that you move to reflection to independently verify, but then you also practice the teachings. So for example, growing up, we were all taught, most likely, that it's unwise to use drugs and alcohol. And we understood that intellectually. right? We had that intellectual understanding, but we might have still did it, right? Because we were still making decisions through our lack of wisdom, right? And now because of our ignorance or unknowing of true reality, even though we had the intellectual understanding, we still lacked wisdom, and we still put this substance into the body, right? So getting to enlightenment, yes, there's an intellectual component to it, but you need to be able to get to wisdom, which is ultimately you practicing the teachings and actually choosing to make decisions based in the natural laws. And that's where the mind is then, we can say, is fully awake, because it's now fully cultivated the wisdom and it's fully functioning through that wisdom. It's not just intellectual understanding anymore. And this word grace that you use, can you describe that for me more, what you think about that word grace? You said grace, right?
Yeah. So, from based on what you've said, there seems to be a transition through wisdom from identification with the through personal I to a more universal I. Let's say, for want of a better way of putting it.
Okay.
And I'm wondering, if grace plays a part in that, based on the fact that an individual I wouldn't be able to become a universal I. Does that make sense? So is there some, does grace play a part in that in regards to something enabling the transition from the more personal I to the more universal enlightenment?
So while we call it attaining enlightenment, one of the ways to think about it is that the mind is already enlightened, and it's got pollutions that are hindering you from being able to experience those qualities. So one of the ways you might think about it is like if there was the sun and there's clouds in front of the sun. Well, the sun is still there. It's just the clouds are blocking it. But when you get rid of the clouds, then you can see the rays of the sun come shining through. So the enlightened mind is the same way. As you peel away the pollution, the qualities of enlightenment start shining through more and more. The only difference here is that eventually the clouds are going to come back. But with the enlightened mind, that's not the case. Once you get the pollution out, it's completely out. And now the mind will be experiencing those qualities for the rest of your life.
So my question is basically, to clear that pollution, is that intellectual rigor and education learning?
There's that component to it. You need the intellectual learning, but just the intellectual part by itself isn't going to get you to wisdom. You need to be able to reflect, to be able to independently verify that this is true. And then you need to practice training your mind on a day-to-day basis. There's actual training that you need. So we're almost to the Four Noble Truths. Just take me a second to jump into that. Maybe when I get there, it'll make more sense for you. So any other questions on this stuff? Yes, sir. I think it's already on. Yeah.
Yeah, you can hear me. Yeah, just a question about the no permanent self. So is that saying that the content of the self is not permanent, as in it changes form, character, and so on? Or is the self itself not permanent? So if that's the case, how am I different from you?
Sure.
How can I be reborn if there is no self, if there is just one universal mind, if that's the case?
Okay, sure. So the Buddha is saying that there is no self, and this is something you can independently verify, that there is a body, but this doesn't define who you are. There is a mind, but that doesn't define who you are. Even your choices and decisions don't define who you are, because sometimes people are taught to think, I am an alcoholic or I am an addict, right? No, that's not true. I doesn't exist. What's really transpired is in the past, this being used to make choices to use drugs and alcohol, but that doesn't define who I am today. The decisions that we made in the past doesn't define who we are today. So it's to say that there is no you there, right? So there is no you. That's the exact words of the Buddha. There is no you there. But the mind's going to keep trying to cling to something as what you think is you. right? And the difference is yes, there is a physical body there, and yes, there is a mind there, and you've been exposed, or this mind has been exposed to different experiences, and this mind has been exposed to different experiences. So we have different thoughts and ideas, we have different experiences, different ways of looking at the world, and that's what makes the world unique, is that we all have those kinds of things. But that's still not you. That's not who you are. Your thoughts and ideas are not you. It's not who you are. So when we talk about rebirth, sometimes people bring this up. Well, if there's no you, how can we experience rebirth then? Well, this word that was used in the original source teachings of the Buddha is called samsara. And this is usually translated to the cycle of rebirth. But a better way to think about this is the cycle of new existence. I share this in the first book because they've been translating it for a long time as the cycle of rebirth. But there's nothing that's actually being reborn. When you look at the teachings of the Buddha, he talks about a brand new body and a brand new mind every single time that comes together for an existence. So the way you might think about it is like there's a cardboard box A and there's a cardboard box B. Completely different cardboard box, different shape, different color, different texture, different size, completely different. But the contents of cardboard box A, when cardboard box A deteriorates, that's the mind. The contents, cravings and residual memories go into cardboard box B. Completely new being. But there's cravings and residual memories from the previous being in this new mind. And that's how it's happening. It's called the cycle of new existence. But I still use rebirth because that's what people are familiar with. But then I teach you to be able to understand it through this way that the Buddha taught it, which is a brand new existence every single time. So the Buddha never says that there is a soul or there isn't a soul. He leaves it as an undeclared teaching. So whenever you hear people talking about a soul or some permanent thing that goes from life to life, they haven't actually investigated the teachings of the Buddha closely because he never talks about anything like that. He actually has this one point in his teachings where he says, remember what I taught. I taught this. And then he points to the Four Noble Truths, which is what I'm about to teach you. And he says, remember what I did not teach. I did not teach this. And he gives 10 undeclared teachings. And one of those is he says, I'm not going to teach whether there is a soul or there isn't a soul. He basically just left it as an undeclared teaching because everything that a Buddha teaches is independently verifiable. And he didn't have evidence to prove that there is a soul, but he didn't have evidence to prove that there isn't a soul either. So he just left it as undeclared, and it's not relevant to all of these other teachings that he shares. Yeah, these are great questions. You guys are obviously thinking about what I'm sharing, so this is really nice. Okay, so let me go forward here, and I think you guys will start putting this together a bit more. So one more little building block, then we'll talk about the Four Noble Truths. So there's something called craving, desire, attachment, expectations, wants, holding, grasping, clinging. This is a way to refer to what's going on in the mind where there's a longing and a yearning. There's a chasing after the objects of your affection, thinking that the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide some lasting satisfaction. So the mind chases and chases and chases. It pulls in the direction of the objects of its affection. It's like an unquenchable thirst. The mind seeking satisfaction externally. So if you've ever been in the mall and you've been walking through the mall and you're like, oh, new pair of shoes. Oh, I can't wait to get those shoes on my feet. Oh, yeah. That's the mind longing and yearning. It's not the shoes themselves that is the craving, desire, attachment. It's the way the mind's longing and yearning for it. Or it might be a video game or a new phone or a new computer or something like this. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Where the mind's pulling towards something. It's kind of like, man, I don't feel good here. What do I need? More money. That'll fix everything. Let me get some more money. And now the mind chases after that for a while. Oh, I don't feel good. What do I need? Oh, a new boyfriend, a new girlfriend. That'll fix everything. Let me get one of those. Oh, what do I need here? Oh, a new house, a new car, a new job. The mind's always seeking satisfaction externally. This is called craving, desire, attachment, longing, yearning, chasing after the objects of its affection. But it's not the object itself. It's the way the mind longs and yearns for it. Okay, so this is the last little thing that I need to teach you before I can now teach you the Four Noble Truths, where you can have this real breakthrough. Okay, there's 4 simple statements here that you can independently verify. The first one's explaining the problem. The second one's explaining the cause of that problem. The third one is explaining the solution. And the fourth one is explaining the complete solution. So the problem that the Buddha discovered is that everyone that is unenlightened will experience discontentedness. The problem is the anger, the sadness, the frustration, the agitation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, all those discontent feelings, the conditional feelings, that the mind can only experience this feeling based on some condition. The mind is shaken up. It's unsteady. It's uncalm. That's the problem. The cause of that problem is craving, desire, attachment. Discontentedness is caused by craving, desire, attachment, wants, and expectations, wanting things to be permanent when in reality, everything in the world around you is impermanent. I'm going to explain this for you a few times, and I'm going to give you some examples to help you see this. Okay? So the mind's craving permanence while it's living in an impermanent world. So think back to that boyfriend or girlfriend that you got together with. When you first got together, you were probably happy and excited, right? This person was showing you affection. You were going to the movies, going to dinner. Maybe you're going to the park. You were having great conversations. Maybe you were having sexual contact. Lots of pleasure, right? But then at some point, the relationship deteriorates and you guys break up. And now you might be really frustrated or really angry. You might be lonely or bored. You might be missing this person. It's not your love that's causing this or your care. It's the mind craving permanence, wanting this person to be in your life permanently, when in reality, ever since the beginning of the relationship, it was always impermanent. But the mind didn't understand that. It lacked that wisdom, that this relationship was going to come to an end at some point, even if you're together for the rest of your lives. More likely than not, one of you are going to die first. So the mind craves permanence. And as long as it was getting what it wanted, which was this person in your life, there was a certain amount of comfort to a certain degree. But when you guys ended the relationship, the mind wasn't getting what it wanted and what it expected, what it was longing, yearning for, which was this permanence. And now the mind struggled with that. So if we take the example of grandma or grandpa dying, or mom or dad or brothers and sisters dying, you might have grieved or had sorrow or sadness during that period of time. You're not a bad person. You haven't done anything wrong. It's just what the unenlightened mind does, is it craves permanence. That if it gets what it wants, it gets pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, and others. But if it doesn't get what it wants, it gets painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, and others. Right? So as long as grandma and grandpa are alive, I'm happy. But then when the unenlightened mind experiences the impermanence that grandma and grandpa has died, the mind doesn't like that. It's craving permanence. And now that's where the grief and the sorrow and the sadness will come in. It's not the love. The love is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. The fact is that grandma and grandpa were born, so they had to die. All that's happened here is change. That's all that's happened. But the mind craves permanence. You can see this if you've ever been to a wedding. Maybe brothers or sisters were getting married and you could see people crying or grieving at the wedding, right? This isn't love that causes that, because this person's going out into the world with somebody else, right? This is wonderful. They're starting a new life, a new relationship. But what's happening here is they're holding on. Brothers and sisters are like, that's my brother. That's my sister. How dare you take them away from me, right? The mind's holding on and craving permanence. And now at this wedding ceremony, the mind's confronted with the fact that your brother is impermanent. They're not going to be in your life permanently. Your child is not going to be in your life permanently, right? So now people might grieve at a wedding. Or if you've ever seen children get dropped off at school for kindergarten or pre-K, or maybe you can remember when you got dropped off. Right? Oh, people are crying. People are really upset. Mom and dad might be crying and upset. The child is crying and upset, right? This isn't love because you're sending your kid to school. This is wonderful. They're going to get an education, right? This is outstanding. No, there's grief and there's sorrow because the mind's holding on and craving permanence. The kid thought mom and dad were permanent, and the parents thought the kid was permanent. The mind's holding on and craving permanence. So now there's this discontentedness when they're going off into school. Here's an example that doesn't include relationships. Maybe you'll be able to see it more clearly this way. Let's just say you got a brand new car and you bought this brand new car and you're so proud of your car. You're driving it off the parking lot and they're like, wow, look at her. She's so successful. She got a new car. Wow, look at him, man. He's really doing a good job. You're so proud driving your nice new car. You park it at the store. You go inside and you come out and there's a scratch on your car. Oh my goodness, you might be so frustrated or angry. You've been saving for this car for 10 years and now you finally got it and there's a scratch on the car. Well, if you get frustrated, it's not the scratch that's causing it. And it's not the person who scratched your car. What's causing the frustration is the mind's craving permanence. It's craving for this car to look permanently beautiful. Now, we're not talking about what's wise or unwise here, because obviously when we go through a parking lot, we aspire not to scratch anybody's car, right? That's why we walk through the parking lot carefully. But this car is impermanent. The paint's going to fade. The tires are going to need to be changed. The upholstery is going to get ripped and torn. And if your mind is craving permanence, when all of this change is happening, the mind doesn't like that. And it's going to struggle and it's going to have anger and frustration. So one of the ways to say this is the mind craves permanence. Another way to say it is that the mind does not like impermanence. The unenlightened mind does not like change. Think about your life. Think about times where you've had the most changes. Maybe you were changing jobs or living locations or relationships. These were probably some of the most challenging times for you in life, when you're changing jobs, living locations, and relationships, because the mind doesn't like change. That's what the unenlightened mind does, is it craves permanence. It doesn't like change. So these are just a few examples, and I can give you example after example. But what's going to really help you is you need to be able to see this truth for yourself. That's why we call it the truths, because you need to be able to see it for yourself. I understand it's true. The Buddha understood it's true. Other people understand it's true, but you need to see it. So don't believe me. Independently verify this. Here's how you do it. Take a recent time when you've been angry or frustrated, irritated, or annoyed, or some other feeling. It might have been this morning or yesterday or last week. Look at that situation with these fresh eyes. What was it that you wanted? What did you expect? What were you longing, yearning for? And if you would have got it, you would have been happy. But because you didn't get what you wanted, you were frustrated or angry or irritated. If you can't see it, let me know, right? Because oftentimes what the mind does in the unenlightened state is it blames other people. That might have been what you were doing at the time. Might have been trying to blame someone else. Or you might have been pushing people away or being bitter, harsh, and hostile or putting expectations on people. This is what the unenlightened mind does when it's untrained. But if you look at this with fresh eyes, you should be able to see it. But if not, let me know. I've had a student one time, they called me after studying with me for several months. They said, David, I need to talk to you. I said, yeah, what is it? They said, I know you teach that it's my own mind that's causing these feelings, because that's what I'm teaching you, is that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. But I'm having a lot of trouble seeing this. I said, okay, what happened? They said, I went to work this morning and my house looked beautiful. I came home after about 8 or 10 hours of working really hard, and my wife had this craft project all over the house. And when I walked in, I got frustrated and irritated. How did my mind cause this? I wasn't even there. She's the one who messed up the house. Didn't she cause me to be frustrated? Nope. It was your own mind. Your mind was craving permanence. When you went to work, your house looked a certain way, and you expected it to look exactly the same way when you came home. Your mind was craving permanence. And when you came home and it looked different, your mind was frustrated. Your house can't look that way permanently. It's not possible. And just like your wife has this craft project all over the house, that's not permanent either. She'll eventually put it away, right? So you need to be able to look at this through your own direct experience, your own situation, so that you can see the truth for yourself. Because every single time you've ever been angry or frustrated or irritated your entire life, it's been your mind the entire time. You might have been in knockdown, drag out fights with people where you've been trying to convince people adamantly to stop doing what they're doing, or else you're going to continue to get angry and frustrated. But I can assure you that it was your own mind that was causing this, and that's where you can get help if you can't see it. Now, surely they could have been doing something that was unwise, but that wasn't what was causing the anger. It was the mind craving permanence. I want everyone to do it this way, and I can only be happy if they do it that way. And when someone does it a different way, the mind doesn't like it. So you can look through your life and you can see every single time that you've ever been angry, it's been your own mind that's causing it. And this is why we call it a breakthrough. Because if you keep going around the world blaming other people for these feelings, you'll never fix it. You'll keep pushing people away. You'll be bitter, harsh, and hostile, or you'll put your expectations on people, and you won't be able to live harmoniously with all beings around you. So you need to be able to get to the point where you can have a breakthrough to being able to see that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. Because once you do, then you're able to understand that there's a solution. Because if it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, that means you can eliminate them. If it's other people that are causing these feelings, you can never eliminate them. Right? But because it is your own mind that's causing these, that's why you can actually eliminate them. That's why the Buddha was able to eliminate them. That's why other people can eliminate them, because it's the mind itself that's causing it. So if you understand that the cause of discontent feelings is craving, desire, attachment, well, if you eliminate the cause, you'll eliminate the effect. Right? That's the cause and effect. If you eliminate the underlying cause of something, then you will eliminate the effect. So you need to be able to eliminate the longing, the yearning, the chasing after the objects of your affection, wanting things to be a certain way permanently. And sometimes when I talk about that, people say, well, wouldn't my mind come all the way over here where I'm dull and lethargic and mundane and lazy? Well, it could, but that's not what the Buddha is teaching you. The Buddha is teaching you to come to the middle, where you can pursue things as a goal, objective, or interest, and you can have enthusiasm and ambition and motivation, but it's not based in craving, desire, attachment. So the unenlightened mind can typically see these two extremes very well, is the chasing or the dull, lethargic condition. But there's this middle way that is less clear for the mind to be able to see, where you gradually work towards goals, objectives, or interests, but you don't form your feelings on whether you accomplish that thing or not. And this is something that you need to be able to learn more about and train your mind to be able to do. Because once you understand that your mind's causing your own discontent feelings and that you can eliminate it, the fourth noble truth is explaining to you the solution to this is the Eightfold Path. That's the complete perfect plan that's going to guide you in how to completely transform the mind. That's why the Eightfold Path is the core central teaching of the Buddha. It starts with right view. This is the very beginning of the Eightfold Path, because you need to have the right view of the world. If you have wrong view, you would go around blaming other people, that it's them that's causing your feelings, and you would never be able to get to the peace and joy that is enlightenment. But if you can establish right view, where you can have the breakthrough to be able to see it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, now you can actually fix it. That's the foundation that everything else is built on, right? So you need to be able to establish right view, where you can see that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. So I'm going to pause here and see if you guys have questions about the Four Noble Truths and what's actually causing these feelings. If you need help with a certain situation, you can share that with me, and I'll help you to be able to see the cravings, desires, attachments that is producing those feelings. So do you guys have any questions on the Four Noble Truths? No questions? Yeah? I had a feeling there was some question. You guys are a question class.
I think it's arguable that conditional happiness has some evolutionary and social benefit, because it's feelings like frustration, anger, and so on that leads to things like criminal justice, political change, harmonious societies, and so on. So how do you balance the need to ensure those things with almost detachment, divorcement from those things?
So that's what your mind's used to right now. You're used to pursuing goals or objectives through your anger and your frustration. And I would say that that doesn't actually produce harmony. That doesn't produce wonderful things. Anger and frustration and all of that stuff just produces war and fighting and hostility and bitterness. There's just more of that coming. So that's what you're used to. That's what you're seeing. And it doesn't produce criminal justice because we don't have fair, equal treatment of everybody in the world. And what I would say is you're never going to get to that point. While it would always be wise to aspire for more and more equitable treatment of everybody in the world, because of impermanence and human beings are involved in making decisions, which human beings are prone to error, we'll never get to a point where everybody is 100% equal in terms of something like criminal justice, because someone can go to court and be found guilty when they're actually not guilty. And someone can go to court and be found not guilty and they're actually guilty, right? Because human beings are involved and their mind has these pollutions, they're not going to be able to make 100% proper decision in every single situation. So these feelings and emotions are just getting in the way of being able to make wise decisions. Because while someone might be used to making decisions through their anger and that motivating certain things, there's this better way of life where you can make wise decisions, not based in anger. Because if you see something that is happening in the world that you consider to be unfortunate and you would like to contribute to improvement in society with that, well, if you walk around with anger and hostility in your mind and you're trying to create change, people aren't going to follow you. People aren't going to be interested in that because they're not interested in bitterness and harshness and hostility. But also, if you're all the way over here on the other side where you could care less about what's going on in the world, that's not going to produce peace and joy either. That's not what the Buddha is teaching. These are the two extremes that people can see very clearly. There's a middle way where you can walk towards improvement in your own life and even in your community and your family and other places like this. And you'll actually be able to do that better as your mind doesn't have this anger and hostility. So while people are used to that, and that's what they're used to, and that's what they see examples of, there's a whole better way of life here that you can actually experience. So I'll tell you this story so that you can understand. It's a very short story. One of the times when I was coming here as a tourist back in 2010, I was here with my wife and I was watching the news and the Prime Minister came on the TV and he said, "Hey, I have a big announcement for you guys." And it was like, "Okay, what do you have to say?" He's like, "I'm just letting you guys know that there was a bomb that was dropped in eastern Thailand. Cambodia flew an airplane over our country and they dropped a bomb in eastern Thailand. We're aware of the bomb. It didn't kill anybody. It just had some property damage. We don't know why they dropped the bomb, but we've been in touch with them and we've let them know that we're concerned about this. And in 2 weeks, we're going to send a delegation to Cambodia so that we can understand why they dropped this bomb. And then we can de-escalate it and solve the problem from there." And they've agreed that they're not going to drop any more bombs for the next 2 weeks, right? So this is wise decision making, right? If there was anger, and by the way, there was no more war after that. If there was anger, well, what do you think Thailand would have done? They would have taken off in their jets and their tanks and started bombing Cambodia. And next thing you know, you got this big war and all these people die, right? So when you have anger in your mind, it doesn't produce beneficial results and wise decision making. But when you can stay calm and collected and you can look at the situation and figure out a way to solve this, now you can actually make wise decisions. And that's the benefit of maintaining your calmness and composure, not allowing the anger to come into the mind. So while people have oftentimes done things through anger, it's not producing beneficial results in the world. But that's what you're used to seeing, and that's why you might think that that's beneficial. But when you see this better way of life and it's being practiced by millions of people around you, you'll be able to see how important it is to be able to get more and more to this middle way and then practice that in your day-to-day life. So as people are dropping bombs in your life, then you can figure out what's the best way to solve this in a way that maintains the peace and joy that you can maintain in your life. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Not yet. There's a mic on somewhere, though. I hear it cracking.
Let's see. This one is on as well now, I think.
What's that?
Is it on?
Yes,
Yes.
it's on. Mhm.
Thank you. So this is more of a question that is based on many things that you have said. There's so many interesting things. And correct me if I misunderstood something. The way I understood it is that you said something that sounded to me like the Dalai Lama is not enlightened, Thich Nhat Hanh was not enlightened. Most people who call themselves Buddhists and go to temples are not actual Buddhists. And even most temples, less than 1% actually teach true Buddhism. And I'm not saying I disagree, but you can correct me later, please, if that's incorrect. Now, then my follow-up question is, where have you met, and it's a concept you haven't defined, I think, but you said the definition of a Buddha is someone who's self-realized, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So I think the terminology in Theravada you would use for someone who gets enlightened through exposure to the latest Buddha's teaching is an arahat or an arahant. So then if the Dalai Lama is not an arahant, if Thich Nhat Hanh wasn't, if all of these famous monks and people were not arahants, where have you met the most arahants?
Mhm. Okay, so the easy answer to that is here in Thailand. I've met plenty of people who are enlightened. In fact, if you're talking with an enlightened being, you're not going to necessarily know unless you understand what enlightenment is. But I would like to just correct some things. I didn't say myself that Dalai Lama is not enlightened, because that would be me judging the Dalai Lama. What I said was the Dalai Lama in an interview said of himself that he was not enlightened. That's a little bit different. You understand the difference? And then I shared that you might have been seeing these things with other monks, but that doesn't mean that they're teaching enlightenment like Thich Nhat Hanh and people like this. So here in Thailand, I've met people that are enlightened. I've met ordained practitioners that are enlightened. I've met household practitioners that are enlightened. Sometimes people say that it's only ordained practitioners that can get to enlightenment. This isn't actually true. Some people will say it's only men that can get to enlightenment. This isn't true. There's females that can get to enlightenment too. So what I'm interested in doing is being able to help people see this better way of life and be able to understand how to get to enlightenment. And some of you guys have had exposure in other places, so you're coming in with that exposure, but you need to be able to understand what you currently understand about the teachings of the Buddha or the path to enlightenment is not 100% true. Otherwise, you would already be enlightened, and you would know that your mind is enlightened by having attained it. So when you're coming to learn, like we were talking earlier, there's going to be things that are different than what you currently understand about the world. And that's really beneficial and that's really helpful. But here in Thailand, you will find people that are enlightened if you know what enlightenment is. But the goal of this path isn't to go around and identify other people who are enlightened. It's for you to get to enlightenment yourself. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
As part of becoming enlightened, is part of that to give up the feeling of certain emotions or to not get these emotions at all?
It's about training your mind to eliminate the causes and conditions that are producing them. There are certain causes and conditions in your mind that are producing these feelings. And when you eliminate those causes and conditions, the feelings just won't arise, right? And sometimes people think that feelings are good. That's where some of you guys are coming from. Like, oh, these emotions are good. This is what makes me feel human, is to have these emotions. But that's because you just haven't seen this other way of life, this better way of life. Like the story that I just gave about the bombing, like the country that I come from, if Canada would have bombed the USA, that's not what would have occurred, right? Because those people aren't functioning through those same understanding as someone here in Thailand. So we have seen examples of exactly the opposite of enlightenment. And that's what I was just explaining with this gentleman, is that what you're seeing in the world is not enlightenment, or you might not have been exposed to these kinds of things. So I'm sharing with you what is enlightenment and what isn't enlightenment. So this will help you to be able to see that more clearly.
Yeah, so I would actually come from a different position with regards to feelings. I don't think feelings
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
With regards to feelings,
Mhm.
you know, I don't think all feelings are good things to have. You know, I've been told that I don't feel enough. in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always made me feel like that maybe there's something wrong, that I'm not getting certain types of feelings.
Yeah.
Now I'm nowhere near enlightened because I do get frustration and anger and such. But,
Yeah.
you know, people in my life who I've loved have died, and I haven't felt that sadness because, you know, they're 85 and they've lived their life, and death is an inevitability for all. And I haven't felt that sadness.
Yeah.
And people say, why are you not feeling sad?
Yeah.
Or other emotions. So yeah, I think this idea of feelings and having to feel their feelings, I kind of come from a place of, why do I need to feel these feelings?
Yeah. So when you grow up in a society of people that doesn't understand enlightenment, they don't understand how the mind works, they will see it as very odd or strange that you're at a funeral and you don't feel sad. They will say, you didn't love grandma, you're not even sad. Right? Or something like this. I've had students that study with me and they go to a funeral and they come back and they say, David, my family's telling me that I didn't love grandma because I wasn't crying and grieving the way that they were at the funeral. This is because of their lack of wisdom. And you need to be able to see clearly with wisdom what is true and what is false. But when you've grown up in a place like we all did that thinks of emotions as good and helpful and beneficial, and you know, that's what makes you feel human, and emotions are somehow benefiting you, your mind will get conditioned to think that way. And now, as long as you think that way, you'll never be able to experience something different. But you can get to the point where you can see true reality that, no, I'm not grieving at grandma's funeral. I loved grandma deeply and I cared for her, but I'm not sad. And that doesn't mean that I don't care and I don't love. It just means I'm not attached to her, because I understand she's not permanent. She was born, so therefore she had to die. And you can experience life differently, but it's going to be different than the people around you. And it's going to feel odd, and people might look at you and they think you're the one who's odd. But more and more, when you spend time around people who are actually training their mind in this way, you'll be able to see true reality. So like, if you get together, when I have classes of students that have been learning with me for a while, you can talk to them and they'll tell you the transformation that they're experiencing in their life. And some of them had the very similar questions as you guys here today. And they might have thought it was very odd to get rid of sadness and anger. But now that they're starting to do it and they can see the results, they'll tell you it's a much, much, much better way of life. So if you've been around people who think of feelings as quote unquote good or beneficial, or that's what makes you human, or that shows that you love, the fact that you're grieving at a funeral, you might think that maybe there's something wrong with you. And this isn't true. It's just that those people are lacking wisdom to understand this better way of life, because out in the West, these types of things that I'm talking about doesn't exist. You know, people think that they can't even fathom getting rid of anger or frustration or sadness. They can't even imagine that. Like, someone could have their mom be murdered and still maintain their peace and joy. They can't even fathom that ability. But I can share with you how this occurs and why this occurs and how to make it happen, and that it's a much, much, much better way of life than anything that we've been exposed to in the past. But you need to be able to see it for yourself. Okay, so I don't think there's any other questions here. So if you can start to see that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, this is helping you to be able to establish right view, that you understand that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. Because what we tend to do is blame other people in the unenlightened state. And if that's the case, then we just continue to walk around with the anger and sadness and frustration. But once you start to develop this right view, then you can build all these other factors on top of this. And I'm going to be teaching this on Tuesday morning, the entire path, because it takes about 2.5 hours to teach the entire path. This course coming up Monday through Friday, it's 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. You guys are welcome to come if you like, or you can come to the whole thing or part of it. It's really up to you. I'll be here teaching, and there'll be people here learning, but I'm going to walk through this entire path so you can see the entire path and how it all works. Today was just about giving you guys an introduction to the teachings of the Buddha. And what I'm going to do to just kind of end on that is what the teachings of the Buddha are, is what I shared towards the beginning, is to heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt ever again. Because you don't need to walk around with these feelings. You can actually eliminate them, and you'll be able to see the peace and the joy in the mind, that the mind can just always enjoy things. I'll just give you guys one example from this. My wife, who's Thai, she goes to the USA twice a year. She goes for 2 months at a time, right? So me and my son, my 13-year-old son, we're here by ourselves during that period of time. She goes to the USA. We stay here in Thailand. She's Thai. I'm from the USA. I stay here. She goes there, right? Well, when she is here, we have a really good time. We enjoy that immensely when she's here. But when she's gone, we enjoy that too, right? Because we're not attached to her. We understand that she is impermanent, that she's not permanent in our life. But if we were attached to her, that means we could only be happy when she's here. And then when she's gone, we would feel miserable. And it's not our love that's causing that. It's our attachment if we experience that, right? That if we held on to her and we crave for her to be permanent, we can only be happy when she's here. But she's not going to always be here because she is impermanent. So you can heal from what hurt you, whether it's an ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend, if it's a parent that has died, if it's been some difficult situation in the past that you've experienced, you can overcome all of that. And that's what the training of the Buddha is helping you to be able to do. It's doing this inner work to heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt ever again. So there's opportunities for you to learn more. And these are all the different ways that you can learn. We have books, audiobooks, videos, podcasts, quizzes. You can all access this from our website. We have in-person and online classes, courses, and retreats. There's ongoing programs, which are each weekend group learning program and the Words of the Buddha, the Pali Canon English study group. All of this is on our website. It's available for you at no cost. You can even get to the point where you're experiencing the ability to have personal guidance. If you would like to sit down and talk, either in person or online, I will help you take what's being taught in the classes and apply it to your day-to-day life. Because it's one thing to learn it in class, but it's a whole other thing to apply it to your day-to-day life. So if you're interested in healing from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt again, there's opportunities for you to do that, and everything's available at no cost. That's how you know that I know that this works 100%. Because I don't even charge people to be able to learn and practice this, because I know with 100% certainty that the Buddha's teachings lead exactly where he said they do, to this peaceful and joyful mental state. And if that's something you're interested to experience, there's opportunity for you to be able to do that. And these are some of the ways that you can get started. So if you guys would like to get involved in any of those things, just come talk to me and I'll help you guys get plugged in to the various opportunities for you to learn. Or you can just check out the website and jump in at whatever point that you'd like to jump in and learn. So I just, in my class, the way I do with all of my classes is I just would like to say thank you for your interest to learn and grow and develop and understand the teachings of the Buddha. Because as you learn and grow, it's helpful to you, it's helpful to those around you, and it's helpful to all of humanity. Because as you're becoming a more peaceful, loving, and gentle individual, it's going to help you, it's going to help those close to you, and it's going to help all of humanity. So I like to end each one of my classes by just saying thank you. And perhaps I'll see you guys in a future class. Whatever you choose to do, have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Okay? Sawadee-khap. Sawadee-khap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.